I wish to welcome you to the Superintendent's Workshop being held in the Joe N. Idolette Jr. TEC. I ask that out of respect to everyone, please silence all electronic devices if you're in the room at this time. Also, if you have any material you wish to share with any board member, please give that to our Executive Assistant, Mrs. Moray, who's seated over here. We'll take a break every 2 hours or if needed before that. At this time, I'd like to recognize the superintendent to explain the purpose of the workshop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The purpose of this workshop is to present items as well as receive feedback from the board. The majority of items will be coming eventually for board approval during a official business meeting. Our first agenda item is update on the strategic plan and budget implications. On our activity that we're participating, I just want the board to know I'm going to check right now, listen attentively for myself, because I'm going to be listening attentively. And Dr. Jacobs, I think you start us off.
Sure. Good afternoon, board members.
Oh, your
Through
mic's
the
not on.
chair, this afternoon, it's on.
Oh, sorry.
This afternoon, I will be sharing some of the initial feedback that we've received from stakeholders within the district regarding our upcoming development of our district strategic plan. During our planning process, when we initially re-envisioned our strategic plan in 2020, we were extremely intentional in gathering information and feedback and perspectives from a broad range of stakeholders, both within the district, as well as those stakeholders who are external to the district. And so as we ventured out on gathering of this feedback, we really have three objectives. The first is to help drive and drastically expand innovation within the district. We know as a district, if we are going to continue to be the first choice for our families within Indian River County to provide education to their students, we need to continue to innovate in ways that creates personalized learning pathways and a range of school choice options for our students and families. Next, with that innovation, we acknowledge that it's important to strengthen our leadership capacity for sustaining instructional improvement. So we've done a great deal of work on those instructional and support systems that have helped us realize unprecedented outcomes in this district, but also for leading innovation, which requires leadership to think in different ways maybe that we have before. And then finally, positioning our district for long-term success. Dr. Moore has talked on a variety of occasions that initially you will get reactive change, but in order to sustain that change and improvement over time, we have to not only be diligent about adapting to changing circumstances that we find around us, but also having our leaders learn how to adapt to those changes to lead forward for the district. So just to give you a little bit of insight, we have talked a lot about innovation as part of our 2025-2030 district strategic plan, but I would be remiss in not sharing that our district has already started to have an eye towards innovation and implement innovative solutions to identified maybe problems or identified needs within our district. I just wanted to provide a little bit of example of the innovations that are serving essentially as a bridge between our 2020 to 2025 district strategic plan and our upcoming 2025 to 2030 strategic plan. Namely, the development of K-8 models has been a response to desire in the community to have a different model of schooling for our students. As you know, during our last business meeting, the board unanimously passed the development of K-8 models within our district, and there were some requests to ask about what budget implications might be related to the district strategic plan as we share out feedback. So as you know, developing a K-8 model will require different staffing. So that has implication for our staff allocation model that we've been routinely using. And at this point, you'll see the budget implications are very high level. That's because the strategic feedback we have right now is very high level. We're looking at it from a systems perspective and not from a strategy perspective at this point. Also, over the last 5 years, we have drastically expanded our data infrastructure And that has enabled us to be agile problem solvers and have accessible and dynamic data available at all levels of our organization. The budget implications of those is we have to have the staff to be able to lead that data infrastructure, to be able to maintain that data infrastructure, and to be able to move it forward in innovative ways as our organization changes. Also, we have data visualization licensing. So we have platforms that we utilize in order to provide that data in a coherent and understandable way to our staff. And so we continue to maintain that licensing, and that has implications for our budget. And a final example I wanted to point out is our innovation leadership training. So as we talk about expanding innovation over the next 5 years, we have not just stopped and paused with regard to training our leaders. During this past academic year, we've obtained 2 grants to really build capacity in our leaders, in our teacher leaders, to be able to think about innovation in different ways than maybe they have before, and also to equip them with the skills to engage in those conversations and that planning that's going to drive innovation for our district. So with regard to initial feedback on innovation and leadership, we first started with our internal stakeholders. And we wanted to look at the outcomes, values, and design principles related to innovation so that we could build a cohesive innovation framework in which all aspects of the organization can understand and plug into with regard to planning and implementation. The outcomes are really what will we see if we implement innovation and leadership with excellence. So what will we see, hear, feel, what do we expect as a district with regard to innovation outcomes? Next are the values. Why are we even doing this work? Why is it important for us to innovate? And why is it important for us to build a strong leadership bench? And then finally, design principles. So those are essentially those rules on which we use and test the innovation that we are hoping to accomplish against. So what are the fundamental guidelines when developing an innovation and or leadership initiative or strategy? So there's a lot of different stakeholders within our district that are engaging in this work. There's innovation in curriculum and instruction, in finance and business services, and other areas. So we wanted to be able to have some kind of design principles that everybody abided by to ensure that our innovation was working within the framework that we have established. So the initial feedback was gathered from 3 main stakeholder groups. Our district leadership and innovation work group, this started way back in October, and this work group is a multidisciplinary group of district leaders that helps provide some initial thinking around the work or the scope of work that needs to be done within our district. Our district leadership symposium, so this is our cabinet and our senior leaders that come from a variety of departments across the district, and we had a work session that was closely aligned to the former work group's sessions. And then finally, another layer of this is the curriculum specialists who are out in our schools and actively coaching our teachers on a daily basis. They essentially have a pulse on what is going on in our schools and where our curricular and instructional needs are located. So with those 3 stakeholder subgroups, we collected their feedback and just identified high-level themes. So these are not things that are set in stone. These are things to help provide a foundation for school board members to understand where district stakeholders think innovation has to go. The first area is outcomes, and when you look at the different themes from the different stakeholder groups on outcomes, they said really if we innovate well, we're going to have exemplar teaching and learning experiences, and those learning experiences are going to be sustained over time. We'll also see growth in student enrollment because we'll have a broader pathway and school choice options for our families within our community. Next, we'll see continuity in K through 12 pathways. One of the pitfalls whenever you're talking about doing new ways of work or creating innovations is to chase those things that are those shiny objects without any real connection to the overall planning and framework of the district. And so our stakeholders thought it was important that we really have continuity for students as they enter K or kindergarten and as they travel through the course of their school career to the 12th grade. Also, we'll see a culture of innovators, so innovation won't be just led by one or two people or one or two departments. It will be embedded throughout the district. We'll have an established leadership bench, a robust one in which we actively have individuals who are ready to lead in various capacities within our district, and a sustainable framework for innovation so everybody understands our way of work with regard to this area. The next area in which we looked for themes were the values. And what is it that are the reasons why we're doing this work? Number one is a commitment to educational excellence. We have the choice as a district essentially to say we were a grade A district for 2 years in a row, we've made the top 10, and so we will just continue on the current path. However, it was very clear when talking to these different work groups that it was important to continue to accelerate our educational outcomes and look for new ways to serve our families within our community. Also, collaborative decision-making enhances the design process. So the stakeholders thought it was very important to have multiple stakeholders providing various perspectives so that we could get a more comprehensive picture of the way that innovation needs to occur within our district. We have an accountability for the work in every student, so that's not only the accountability of our district and school employees for the roles and responsibilities that they serve, but we have accountability to ensure that we're providing the highest quality educational experiences for each and every student that walks in our doors. Every employee and student matters, and so we need to keep an eye on how innovation impacts our employees as well as our students, and that agile leadership drives innovation, our ability to adapt to quickly changing circumstances around us will ultimately drive how effective we are in innovating school choice. And finally, the design principles. What are those guidelines that maybe we use whenever creating innovation? Again, that multidisciplinary perspective came up again. Data-driven decision-making. We've really established a culture of data-driven decision-making here within the district, and we would like to carry and connect that into innovation. That our innovations should be driven by the user experience. What is it that students need? What is it that students are interested in? And how do we connect the innovations that we implement to those end user experiences? Also, there needs to be a system of innovation mapping in which we have a full and complete understanding of what innovation looks like at all levels of our district, whether it be at elementary school, middle, or high school, whether it be in curriculum and instruction or in business operations. And then finally, if we are creating innovations, those innovations need to be sustainable. So they need to be able to exist over time, and they need to be scalable. So if we find that a certain innovation is working very well and driving accelerated outcomes in one area, we need to be able to have the ability to expand that to other areas of the organization. So in addition to these stakeholder groups, and I should mention that we are actively right now collecting additional feedback from focus groups throughout our community. So families, community members, principals, assistant principals, so that information will be brought back to you at our next superintendent's workshop. But at the end of January, we met with our Superintendent Student Advisory Council, and we essentially asked them this question. If we did innovation well in this district, what would you see? What would it feel like? What would you hear? And what would it look like? And so here's just some of the themes that our students provided us. One big theme that was overarching was that all students feel safe and welcomed at school, and I know that is a major board priority, and so that clearly aligns with board perspective on this area. Campuses are visually pleasing and clean, and that's not surprising given how visual our students have become with social media and engagement in electronic platforms. So they really talked about that environment, that they not only felt cared for, but they felt like they were in a place where they could be proud of. That there was flexible seating, which this was interesting, came up a couple of times in classrooms, that the classrooms didn't look like what we would see as the traditional classrooms where we were taught, but there's flexible seating in which they can engage with the instruction in a variety of ways that's most comfortable to them. that there's increased student involvement, school spirit, and motivation. So that really showed an internal locus of control with our students, that they felt like students needed to take ownership of how involved they are in the school, how much school spirit they had in the school, and how motivated they were to do the very best when they're at school. And then finally, and no surprise here, they would like to see an increased integration of technology into the school environment. And I should mention that it was not only we just want to increase technology, but we want to leverage the technology that we already have to be able to do some of the activities that we already do. So an example would be that having the media center in which they're able to record announcements. They would love to expand that, where students are doing the announcements in certain spaces. And so when we look at these different areas, the two big buckets where we see there would be budget implications are in facilities and technology as well. I would like to also mention the state of the district. This has been intentionally built into our strategic planning process. We have a guiding principle of communicating with all stakeholders with transparency and integrity. And the state of the district was the opportunity for the district to not only highlight our student talent, but to also share the current status of our district as well as the progress of our district. This information is important, so when we engage with our stakeholders during the focus groups, that they have a real and current understanding of what is happening in the districts and the remarkable outcomes that we have achieved. And then finally, these focus groups that I mentioned to you, these are actively occurring. I want to thank Bruce Green, Dr. Jennifer Began, and Dr. Kira Shafty. They all have been assisting in facilitating these focus groups so that we are able to reach as many people as possible within our community. And you can see we have everything from teachers all the way to parents and faith-based leaders. Our teachers were our first stop last week, and we had some excellent feedback from those particular focus groups. And then finally, I welcome any school board questions or feedback related to our initial gathering of information.
Okay, board members? Mr. Dyer?
Sure. You know, I think that one of the things that I saw in the beginning that is very important, and I'm glad that you are thinking about it, is not only setting the objectives, but I would challenge you to make sure that they are measurable. To have objectives without having any way to measure them, to me, is not really the right thing to do. I mean, everything that we do, there has to be, when we're talking about outcomes, we need to be able to measure it the best that we can. So I would hope that there is a lot in the objectives that we can see where you're trying to take it. I'm trying to read it, and I want to make sure also that there's plenty of support to fund, or plenty of fund support to support any of the innovation that you need. I mean, to come up with great ideas and not have the funding to support it, it is kind of a sure outcome that we would not expect. So we need to make sure that funding really does match and follow the innovation that we're putting in the school districts. The thing I love, really, one of the most things that I love about this district is the accountability that you guys have for kids, for them being successful, and as you said, accountability for the work and for every student. I think that is just a huge statement, and it's something that I certainly hope that this district always maintains, because that accountability is what makes you guys, in my opinion, great and as successful as you are. I was a little surprised by the student input, if you want to know the truth. When I talk about innovation, I'm certainly not thinking about a clean building. I mean, I think it's great, and I think we should have, well, and we do, have well-maintained, clean buildings, but I'm thinking about outcomes that really are going to make a difference, how technology is interacting with what we're doing. You know, thinking outside the box. It all seemed like a kind of an inside-the-box thought process for me. And so I think that if we, at some point along the line, is we probably ought to challenge the students with things to think outside of the box rather than in the box. So I guess if there was anything that was kind of surprising from what you said, it was that. I would have expected more robust whether it is robotics or coding or, you know, so many of the things that are going on. I mean, different types of labs or things that we can do, especially with aerospace here in this community. What are we going to do to really meet the challenge of tomorrow and to prepare them for things that are coming? I think that that's probably a big deal. I like the process. I think it's great that you're getting all the input, and I think that'll make it a better plan long-term. But again, measurable outcomes. What is innovation? How do we fund it? How do we separate the nice from the necessary? And what is necessary to support this innovation? And I think that, you know, as we're started, we're really going to go through some interesting times as a school district. I mean, we are setting out, you know, going to this K through 8, where we now have, what is it, 5 schools that'll be four schools that are going to be K through 8. That is going to cause kind of a ripple effect that we're going to have to manage as we go forward. So I think that there's just a lot of things that we're going to have to be dealing with, and I think the next few years and how we really, as Dr. Moore would say, keep the main thing the main thing as we go through the next couple of years of implementing innovation and getting ourselves set up for the future, I think is really a big deal, and I hope the plan addresses these kind of short-term, year-to-year structure and things that we need to do to support the desired outcome long-term.
Okay, Dr. Jones?
Thank you very much, Dr. Jacobs. Very well done. I think I've said this a few times. Change is the only constant in life, and if we don't do it, it's going to be done for us. I firmly believe this in education today. Just follow up on what Mr. Dyer said, you know, concerns with K-8. I just say when we get that information out, and I went to one of the meetings at one of the schools who will become a K-8, just meet it head on. This is why we have to do it. I know you have concerns about this, but here's a solution for it. You know, you get these calls, well, what will happen to this? What will happen to performing arts? Meet with them, get it out there, move forward. This is how we're going to work. And I know Dr. Moore said several times it's about choice. It is. But again, I think this community will be there for us. And if we're having problems with maybe making this work in a K-8, how they can help us, either through education fund or something like that. The system's perspective is key. Sustainability is key. You know, when you're a good leader and you leave, either as a principal, assistant superintendent, or wherever you are, it still is going on because it was embedded. It just wasn't put out there, oh, we're going to do this, no feedback, no questions. It is embedded, and I think that's very, very important. I don't know if you could do this, but, you know, make sure everybody would know, and the public, I'd like to see some of those focus groups just to attend and listen. So I think it'd be interesting to listen to the teachers, the parents, wherever you're going to go. You know, the state of the district, combining that with our art gallery and our opening of the media center and our jazz bands, that's what's key, I think, to this public. You know, going in there, this is what we do. We know we're fighting for students right now. We know that, you know, student attendance, students drive our budget. So we have got to be a step ahead. And I really want to thank Dr. Moore in this district for moving us forward. Because, you know, with the students that may not be attending here because they have a different choice, I certainly want them to know that this is the best game in town, and it's important. And I feel that from the community, too. It's very important. Dr. Moore said something very important at the, I think it was when we were talking at the State of the District, you know, support public schools. You know, this is our community. This is our school. You know, I feel I was voted on for part of this board, and I am here to support public schools. I'm a public school advocate. What can we do to make things better. And I think that's how we should always look at it. And I know we're not going to please everybody all the time, but by golly, we've got to give it our best shot. So, but I just think that key, and keep it going, is keeping innovation embedded in everything so it's sustainable and not just a check mark. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Pasca?
Thank you for the update on the strategic plan. It was very helpful. A couple points. One of them was the, we'll say, novel seating. Was that intended primarily for our younger students rather than the older students, or?
Our Superintendent Student Advisory Council is comprised of middle school and high school students.
Okay.
So they actually were the group that shared back that feedback. I think, part of their experience is the renovated media centers in which they have a full range of flexible seating options.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think is at their forefront, because that's one of the most visible innovations that our secondary students see.
Yeah.
And so that may be what precipitated some of that feedback from our secondary students.
Sure. And I think there might even be something on the agenda coming up for, like mats for our younger kids to learn and sit on, like cushioned mats instead of sitting in a chair or at a desk, which it makes a lot of sense for younger kids. But I'm interested to see like what kind of novel seating they would be interested in with the older kids. I think obviously a lot of the stuff in the presentation is excellent. One highlight from my perspective is accelerating school safety projects and just trying to put a focus on getting projects done like quickly and moving them up from a 5-year plan perspective, trying to get those done as fast as possible. That's a big priority of mine. Obviously, I say it every quarter probably, so you guys are familiar with it. Another potential area of innovation, which is probably a lot more complicated, certainly not something that you can solve immediately, but it's something that I think is worth pondering, is how can we come up with more innovative curriculum material for some of these grades and some of these classes that are a little bit outside of the mainstream approved curriculums. And I'm not going to try to go into detail on how you might do that, but that's probably an area where if we were to find better curriculums that kids could read easier and probably even enjoy reading. Because I remember as a kid, I loved reading my physics textbook, my biology textbook, my chemistry textbook, because I could read it and I could understand it. And if we can put curriculum in the hands of these children that they can easily read and teach themselves, you're going to have a lot better educated students. And I know it's a difficult task, because you kind of, in some ways, you have what's available to you, and you just kind of have to use that. But maybe there is something that we could do in the future at trying to find a better biology book, trying to find a better physics book that is a little bit outside the box, and it's something a kid can pick up and teach themselves, which would be huge, I think, for a lot of these kids. So that's my main takeaway, but thank you for the presentation.
Okay, Ms. Rosario?
So thank you for that, and thank you for providing the PowerPoint in advance. So that kind of helped. A few things that I wrote down here as you were presenting, because I think the purpose or what you're looking for here, based on what I can see, are our feedback on, I think on not just innovation, but also on training and professional learning. So with that said, I would say the main things that are coming up specific to training and PD that I think we should definitely hone in on is the transition from our elementary to middle, right? Our K-8 structure. I think for the K-8 structure and for the classical school that is going to open, I think those schools need to have a little bit of leeway and some autonomy to have their PDs done their way. In other words, let's carve out some time next year and the next several years, obviously, within our strategic plan, to allow them to cater their own PD specific to that school, because they are going to be so unique in their structure, and they're, we're only going to have 4 K-8s, and one of those is a classical. Classical alone has an entirely, new curriculum, new purpose, new everything. And especially as they're adding new grades every year, they're going to add way more grades than our K-8s. Our K-8s obviously are just going to add a 6, a 7, and an 8. So I think training and professional learning really needs to cover, for them anyway, really needs to be specific to them. And I'd like to see our strategic plan say that. I'd like to see it somewhere say that our focus over the next several years in professional learning will be for these schools to focus on the needs for growth in their particular programs. I'd also like us to do more, and I've talked about this over the years. We kind of fell a little bit off of the focus of technical and vocational training, and we need to get back on that. We need to make sure that we are building our Treasure Coast Technical College. Today we had an amazing lunch provided by them, by their culinary department, which is fairly new. The culinary department, I think maybe a year or two old, am I right? Just over a year. And they're doing fantastic. So I think we have an opportunity, and I'm going to extend that also to dual enrollment. I've talked about this at length's end. We are not doing enough on our school campuses to encourage high school students to dual enroll. We have an incredible amount of kids whom I have spoken with who have no idea that they could dual enroll. I've talked with their parents over and over again, and the parents like, I don't know anything about dual enrollment. I think that is something that we have to really focus on, because we're missing an entire generation who might be able to, might qualify to sit for the, for the dual enrollment classes, and like, why not? They get college credit and high school credit at the same time. It's just such a wonderful opportunity for kids, and we're not doing enough in that area. So if we can somehow tie in technical, vocational, and dual enrollment, because our Treasure Coast Technical College does offer dual enrollment for our high school students. I'm not sure exactly, I'd love to have the numbers there, Dr. Moore, of how many of our high school students are actually dual enrolled in Treasure Coast Technical College. Maybe if you can present something to us coming up on that. And also, since we are on this topic, if you can add an update of the numbers of how many of our current students are dual enrolled. What does that look like? So this way we can see if it's very low, we certainly have room for improvement. If it isn't, and we're on track, then I think we'll be okay. When I look at, and the other area with PD and training is our gifted program. I know that we're not doing enough in that particular area either, in terms of advanced coursework and our IB programs. With K-8, with the expansion of K-8 in several schools, I'm wondering out loud, and I don't know if anyone knows this information, if the IB program at Sebastian River Middle School, if that has been a topic of discussion there, if they have lower enrollment numbers because of the expansion, what would be the implications of that? Would we combine programs? I see Dr. Moore shaking your head, so what do you say to, how can we have this conversation?
Through the chair, very intentional programming is my response. So the principal is working first with Treasure Coast Elementary School. Actually had a meeting earlier in the year with all three principals from elementary school, middle school to high school to build that feeder pattern approach very, very intentionally. In that specific area, those parents know that pathway. They go into that school, or they should go into that school, let me say it that way, in liberty, knowing my pathway is clearly defined, Sebastian Middle School to Sebastian High School. So very, very intentional programming to make sure that we're transitioning those kids. So just not last week, the previous week, I was with the principal and had that exact same conversation regarding that. So I don't anticipate that, which is a very clearly defined program, having any impact regarding choice. And I would just say, as we're talking a lot about K-8s, that's just step one in the reform of our system. And that's kind of in the confines of this particular plan. It's a starting point that we all know we probably should have started on years and years and years ago, because all other counties, there's something here where I'm going to take a mark from you. We should have, but there's so much more to do regarding that. I think sometimes some of the feedback we got from kids, which I thought was interesting, because that was our exact same feedback. And sometimes, you know, they're thinking innovation right to where we've placed them to think about innovation as the media center versus really kind of problem solving them in terms of what other counties or other districts or other, you know, this is what the world of work is going to look like. Now, does that compare to your classroom? And give them a level of awareness to embrace ultimate change. So I think as we circle back with our next layer of feedback, we're very, very aware of that. Sorry.
Thank you for that. I'm glad that you've had the same conversations. As far as reforms are concerned, I know that we have a lot to go. You know, we have still a lot ahead of us. But one of the things that, I mean, and again, I've brought this up, I don't know if Mr. Dyer has heard me say this because I know Mr. Dyer is fairly new, but I remember when I was in junior high school, and I remember home economics. It was the best class ever. And it was one of those classes that gave us a little bit of everything in middle school, right? I sewed my first pillow. I probably still have it. I remember sewing my first pillow. I remember sawing a block of wood and creating, you know, a car. In fact, I mean, now we have derby cars, but from scratch, not like the kit that you put together, like literally from scratch, and you make the wheels. And I remember those things. I remember learning how to cook. I remember a room where you could do all these things in there, including typing. I mean, I know it's a long, but the skill of typing is incredibly important. And nowadays, you still have the, you know, one finger people where they still don't understand how to type appropriately. What was that?
I said, hey, I'm right here.
Oh, sorry. But I remember home economics. Like, to me, that's innovative. To bring that back, to bring something like that back to our middle schools, if we're going to reform middle schools, and have the opportunity to give them the experiences that they probably just don't get on a regular, everyday basis. And I'm sure no school anywhere is still doing home economics, so like, why not? I always say, why not? If we have an opportunity to be creative in that sense, to me, that's being innovative. Like, bring it back to basics. We're doing everything in our world now is coming back to Basics 101, which is awesome. Like, it just seems to me, we don't have to think completely outside the box to be creative and innovative. It seems there are things that could be right in front of us that make sense. Getting a kid underneath the hood of a car. It's still a skill for me as a woman. I know how to check my oil. And I don't need to be in an automotive shop to do that. I don't need to be in the automotive, you know, program to learn how to do that. To check an air, the air in your tires, things like that, like everyday, daily activities that kids just don't know how to do is so important. Okay, so I'm gonna come back. So anyway, so with innovation, if we can think in terms of those, those lanes, I think I would be more than happy to see those implemented in our strategic plan. I did a word search in our current strategic plan for professional development and training. Very few came up. One came up, strategy 5.1 on facilities or organizational responsibility. Another one came up regarding, and this one I'd like us to keep, by the way, it's 4.1 and 4.2, specific to high-quality differentiated instruction and continuous improvement. That I think, needs to be a staple. I don't think that that should change at all. We certainly need to differentiate instruction no matter what class or subject the kids are in. The other item is 1.2, which is data-driven professional learning. That is another staple I think should not be removed. It should remain in there because, data is always changing. Curriculum is changing, movement is changing. These things are fluid, so we want to be able to ensure that our teachers and our administrators are using data to make decisions at their school level. And then the last training activity that I'd like to remain here, but I think we need to really focus in on, is special needs. Our special needs process and timeline for testing and evaluation, that needs improvement. The services that we provide, I know that there is a lack nationwide of professionals in this area providing services, so it's harder to provide services for students with special needs, but it is a mandate and it is something that we have to be purposeful with and ensure that our kids are receiving the services that are required by their IEP, individual education plan, to ensure compliance and monitoring accordingly. So I think we need to keep those in there, but hone in on some of the areas within that area, within that subject or topic, that we can do better. The superintendent targets, I'm gonna kind of switch a little bit. Dr. Moore, there aren't very, in looking at the targets, the current targets, there doesn't seem, if you do a word search there, you don't see anything on professional learning or PD. You just see the effect of it as it would show up in academics, for example. But I'm wondering if there could be an area, because you are, I hear innovation often now. I hear we're doing an entire slide on innovation, and innovation seems to be the word to move forward in. I'm wondering if there could be a particular section on innovation, just innovation alone, and within that, you can include the specific trainings and professional development or professional learning that would create the innovation within our program. The problem that I see, and you might not see a problem with this, but maybe it might be some brainstorming on your end or just more communication with me or with us as a board, is that's training and professional development in innovation is hard to capture in terms of a target. You would need both qualitative and quantitative measures to get that, and then be able to, rather than just saying, oh yeah, we did 10 PDs on this area, that's not actually showing the growth for that particular teacher. Does that kind of make sense? So I don't know how you could kind of craft it, think of it, however way you want to respond to this particular area, but I think it would be something different, and it would address how you could report and respond to us in your end-year evaluation on the progress of innovation in our district. The other question that I have, I don't know, do you want to respond to that, or you want me to just move on? Okay. The other question that I had is on the last slide. Can you pull that slide? Yeah, thank you. So I see here that there is an invitation for teachers, for a teacher engagement. It says meeting dates, 13 scheduled sessions in January and February, followed by town hall meetings. But where are these? Where, when, what are the dates? I don't see any information, locations, none of that information is here.
All of this information has been publicized on our website with the dates and location of each focus group. In addition, for our teachers, we had different focus sessions for elementary, elementary and secondary teachers. Those teachers were, or all teachers were provided a very specific invitation to those focus groups in case they happen not to check the website, so that we could maximize participation in those. And so we've been actively advertising that for any individuals that want to take part in those focus groups.
I'm sorry.
This just happens to be a summary slide to share
Yeah.
with the board, but the detailed information is on the website.
I'm sorry, did you say that we also emailed teachers? Did we email all employees, all teachers in the district?
For teachers, we sent that information directly to teachers, but not all employees, because we are very intentional about each focus group being focused in on
just their
teachers
area.
versus support staff versus district leaders, because those can be very different perspectives based upon roles and responsibilities.
Okay, so thank you for that. So there aren't 13 scheduled sessions for all of these particular people. There are 13 scheduled sections, and each one of those scheduled sessions will be geared toward, for example, one for teachers, one for support staff, or maybe one or more for
There's-
each one of those particular community, district leaders, faith leaders.
So based upon stakeholder group, there could be 1 to 2 of those sessions scheduled. For example, for teachers, I think we have 4 sessions scheduled that across the county in one centralized location, in the event that our teachers couldn't make it either to a North or South County location. And so we've tried to be very intentional, and no, this is not 13 for each one of them, or else we'd
Okay.
have to hire another staff
Yeah,
member.
that's what I kind of figured, okay. And then these town hall, followed by a town hall meeting, so there'll be scheduled sessions, and then followed by a town hall. The town hall is typically a town hall with Q&A, is that how it works?
So generally, what we have planned at this point in time is we find that providing a centralized location for our community, the town hall will take place here at the district office, and that generally is a presentation with questions and answers. We have not fully designed that yet, so I can't speak to the specific details at this point in time, as we're waiting for the feedback in order to generate the design of that session.
Okay, so the town hall is going to be a separate date then? Got it, okay. So I appreciate that feedback and the information. What I was thinking also in terms of strategic planning, since you're getting our feedback, without going into my notes, or pulling up the meeting from the last meeting, from our last workshop, I almost would have forgotten what we talked about in the last session. And I know you take diligent notes. I know you take really, really good notes there. At any point in time, maybe somewhere midway down the line, could you give us like a summary of what we've done so far, what we've talked about, and some of the feedback that you've received? Because I could give feedback. If board members don't say, yes, I love that idea, is that something that will be implemented? That's the kind of thing that then later on, it's like, well, we talked about it. Well, we didn't get board members. Someone else could say something, and if there's no consensus, it should go nowhere. So I'm just worrying about this process moving forward. What are your thoughts?
Thoughts are, when we talk about best practices in strategic planning, What we do is we gather information not only from school board members, and we are very diligent, yes, in taking notes regarding that, but all of these other stakeholder groups, as well as the data, the existing data that we have on our existing outcomes. And we look for a convergence of data, whether that be qualitative or quantitative, in order to drive the specific design as well as the strategies in the strategic plan. So we certainly can provide a summary of feedback provided to date from board members, but I will share with you that our past practice, and we will continue this, is at the end of all of the focus groups, board member feedback, and town halls, we generally we provide a presentation on what the feedback is, as well as a stakeholder summary report in order to organize the information that is in there. One of the balances that we always do in any type of planning process is taking the feedback, but also identifying what we can and cannot reasonably implement. We get a great deal of feedback for a lot of ideas in here, but all those ideas have budget implications, staffing implications, implications for professional learning. And so again, it'll be a balance of all of those different considerations as we work with the board to craft that final draft of the plan.
Okay, just my last comment is just an awareness that the strategic plan is the board's strategic plan and goals moving forward, even though we work with the superintendent and work with staff, of course, and we desperately need feedback from community members on this moving forward. But the strategic plan is something that the board should take ownership on in terms of setting the goals and moving that forward. So thank you for that.
Done? Okay. Couple things. First of all, thank you for the presentation. Appreciate all the hard work. I have heard, as I've gone to lots of events, I've heard the requests for input everywhere. So I thank you for that. You don't just say it to one group, you say it to every group that you're presenting at, and I appreciate that. So you're looking for student input, you're looking for parent input, you're looking for teacher input, you're looking for administrator input, looking for staff input and the community as well. I heard that several times. And I have to disagree. I don't think this is just the board's strategic plan.
I didn't say that.
I believe it belongs to everyone. And because we all have to take ownership. You know, we're not the only ones that instruct children. Their parents instruct them. So it is a strategic plan that is the community's strategic plan. It's all of ours. Yes, the board approves it, the board votes on it, the board gives input, but we're just one voice. The SMART goals, I wrote down SMART goals because, you know, of course you have to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. You know, I'm sure that you write your SMART goals still. That's something that was ingrained in us back in the 90s, so I appreciate that. The furniture, you know, as I walk through campuses, some of the furniture is really outdated. When I was teaching, I had a bathtub in my classroom. I had a couch. I bought them and brought them into my classroom because I wanted places and spots for kids to want to read and have fun with. Yeah, I had a bathtub, one of those old stand-up bathtubs, little one. No, but I put pillows in it and the kids could read when they wanted to read in it. And it was the favorite place for the kids to go to read. And I think allowing children to have, you know, the bouncy balls. Now, those are in our schools, but they're only for kids that have IEPs that say they can have the bouncy ball to sit on, and I get why they have it. But I agree that, you know, kids should have the opportunity to have furniture that they want to sit in, they want to do, that not sit in rows and desks and chairs anymore. I was not that type of teacher, obviously. But I also know that a lot of kids need alternative seating. So as we see our desks and our chairs falling apart, maybe that's when we start implementing this over time, not just say, okay, because we don't have all the money in the world to do everything we want to do, you know, just kind of work our way towards doing alternative seating like we did with our media centers. And I know now those are centers that kids can't wait to go to. So that gives us an indication that that would be better for the classroom as well. Not every classroom, but, you know, a lot of classrooms. I had wrote down a town hall meeting, so are you going to let all the board members know when those are occurring? And if we attend those, we know to listen and not speak. What else? Ed Foundation. Is there a place where we can find the meeting minutes for when they meet? And because I saw something in there about the Ed Foundation funding something. Okay.
Currently, all of the meeting agendas are posted, and then upon request, those meeting minutes are provided to anybody that would like to have those.
Could you start sending those to the board so we
Sure.
can see them? That way we kind of know what they're working on. That would be great. Dual enrollment. You know, I know that's not for everyone, but it is important that kids know their options. I know AP and IB students who really can't fit in dual enrollment, it's not possible to do all of those things, but kids have choice. They have choice within their own schools. So having that option where a counselor is opening up to everything, and that should be probably 6th or 7th grade, where they're opening up those options of what they can kind of do in high school, that'd be awesome. And home economics and shop, you know, I took them too. I didn't take shop because I wasn't a boy. Back in the 70s, you couldn't do that. You had to take home economics if you were a girl, and that's fine. I learned how to sew a pair of pants that I couldn't fit in. So the standards have changed, though, and we have to follow standards. So I agree with innovating and doing all these cool things, but we have to make sure that we're innovating within the standards that we have to teach by law. Can we fit in some extra things? Sure, but we have to be careful with those things because we have to make sure that, you know, we're not offending any group or we're staying within our, of what our community wants. And then the last thing I'm going to say is about ESE services and support and gifted programs. You know, my sons were both in the gifted program back in a long time ago. There was no gifted program for them. You know, my one son got transported over to the high school to learn how to fly planes on a simulator because that was his interest. So it would be nice, I know we have limited funds when it comes to gifted. It's very limited compared to other ESE services. Hopefully someday legislators will understand the need for that to really push our high-level kids to do some innovative things that they don't need to learn some other things. They need to learn those extra things. So that's where we look for grants and things like that to keep pushing that. And kudos to whatever money we got to do that summer program last year. And if we could continue that and expand it, that'd be awesome. That's all I have to say. thank you so much for the presentation. Mr. Dyer?
Yeah, if I could just say one other thing, that in framing this, we've talked about doing a lot of things because of the competitive environment that we're in. And I'm wondering if we ought to call that out, that we want to be the schools of choice, and we realize that we are in a competitive environment now, and talk a little bit more about that in the plan. And along that avenue, I was talking with some people at the Family Fun Fest regarding preschool. And I know we're talking K through 8, which is very important, but as we all know, one of the reasons why we're going to grade 6 is because we were losing kids as they went from elementary school to middle school. I heard that we have about 150, kids in preschool now, and there's a waiting list of probably around 100, and in August there's probably a demand for 300 or 400. So the question is, I know that it's an investment because we only get, I think in this district, $2,100 per kid for preschool versus $9,000 or $10,000 for other schools. So, but the question is, if we look at it, the return on investment by kids starting in preschool, do they stay with us through the whole programs, and the choices that we're giving, do we then become kind of the place where you want to take your kids rather than going ahead where you're comfortable and where you've been there, actually get them integrated into the public schools earlier? Just a thought, but thanks.
Dr.
I
Jones?
just wanted to add, I've said this too, I think, and I know we opened some new pre-Ks this year, and very, very glad with that. I think, is it 50% we get on that, Bruce? Dr. Moore, okay. I think pre-K is one of the best recruiting tools we can have. Once they get into that school system, that school, and feel good and comfortable and welcome. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Pasca.
In the area of, I guess, innovation within our education, there was something I was interested in asking you about, Dr. Moore, is that do we have any integration with the Civil Air Patrol? Do we know if any of our teachers are involved in that, or our students? Because the reason I bring it, I had a meeting with them about a week ago, the Orlando division. It's called Civil Air Patrol. And they have a lot of educational opportunities specifically for public schools, including lesson plans for specific flight education or aerospace education, and experiments that can be done in the classroom, where, especially with the younger kids, they will even often send in a pilot to help the teacher teach that session. And there's also a cadet program for students where they can be taught to fly, and for teachers where they can go up and fly with pilots. And so there's just a lot of educational programming with Civil Air Patrol. I don't know that we're utilizing it. So I would like, maybe we can set up a meeting with because there is a local chapter. We obviously have a lot of aerospace industry here. I think it's worth investigating. Definitely for some of our schools, there's going to be a lot of kids interested in that. And in specific types of classes where there's standards that could be taught through these educational activities, they have very interactive experiments and other things that can be done, and they will help the teacher put on the class oftentimes too. So especially if we make relationships, but there's a lot of room, I think, for educational opportunity, especially for the kids that are obviously interested in aerospace. Right now they're probably going to start moving all of Texas's aerospace stuff to Florida, and Florida really will become the hub of aerospace technology in the world. So I think it makes a lot of sense for us to try to do anything we can to bolster that educational opportunity.
All right, well, I have to look into that, so I'll get back to you and the board.
Okay.
Mr. Rosario?
Just with regard to the minutes of the foundation, which is subject to Sunshine, should post their minutes on their website and not wait for a request. So there is a tab on there for minutes, so they should be posted on there.
Is that correct?
This is a conversation that we've had before.
Can we refer to the attorney on that?
It's in the Sunshine Law. Thank you.
But you can't.
So there's not a legal obligation to? No, I didn't think so. Thank you. Okay.
I'm sorry, what was that?
So in our research, there is not a legal requirement to post. You may.
Is there a reason why we're not posting the minutes? Because it seems like there seems to be a pushback on this.
With education foundations, they're dealing with matters of private investors providing money and donors providing
that-
money, which They are-
But donors are not subject to public.
correct. And so a
But you
lot
don't
of
have to-
times those foundations discuss that information during their meetings.
But you don't have to put those names on the minutes. Minutes are not, there is no guarantee, there's no format for minutes, so those names that are exempt from public record don't need to be on the minutes. They don't have to be word for word. You're not asking for a transcript. You're asking for minutes of the meeting. So that should be made available. And in my opinion, it sounds like there seems to be something of a reason why we're not being completely transparent with the public, and I think we should. And posting the minutes on the website would be transparent.
Okay. Dr. Moore?
No, we couldn't be any more transparent, and we'll just make sure the minutes are posted in a way we're not
Thank you, sir.
violating anything.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. There was another comment. I forgot what it was, so I'll leave it there.
Okay. Are we on B now?
Mr. Green?
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Through the chair, item B is a request that'll be coming forward at the next board meeting to purchase additional servers for security video camera footage. We are now moving into petabytes of data instead of terabytes. So instead of one with 12 zeros, we're talking about one with 15 zeros and 1 quadrillion bytes of data. So some of these servers are 10 years and older. The original quote for some of these was over $225,000, and through various bids and negotiations, what you have is about $76,000 to upgrade those servers to be able to handle the capacity of video we have. I'll call it horsepower. One of the first things I got from principals last year when I came was, I pull it up and there's a lag or a little bit of delay. So we've been working on a plan to upgrade those systems. And just for your information, we will be harvesting these server parts we have a redundant location at Vero Beach Elementary for the network that we help. So if internet goes down, that helps pull us up. So we'll be reusing the parts of those servers to boost up that. That's not high HD video, but we can still use the resources. So this is a request that'll be coming forward to purchase Lenovo servers with 5 years of maintenance support to upgrade our servers that store our video footage.
Can I just ask one quick question
Yes.
about that? Is there a law that says how many years you have to save everything? Is it 7?
So there are record retention that we follow. For security cameras, there's a minimum of 30 days that we must. So our systems are designed that it'll never store less than 30 days. And then depending on the amount of motion or the amount of video, it could store more than that.
You're talking about camera video?
Just the normal loop. Then if something is pulled for various inspection, maybe during an investigation, then there's records retention on that particular once it's pulled. But just the day-to-day loop of the video, the minimum is 30 days.
Okay. Mr. Rosario?
I don't have a question about this, but when we get, done with this item, it looks like we missed Mr. Green for the district strategic plan. If we could go back to that and see if there was anything that he needed to provide.
Okay. Item C through the chair is contracted services for new hydraulic lifts in transportation. So if you've been to our transportation department, you'll know there are multiple bays, but 4 of them have in-ground lifts, large hydraulic lifts that have metal compartments over those with motors. That equipment was installed when the building was built. I think it's probably around 20 years old. I was there this morning with Ray, who's probably one of the longest mechanics there, and he's rebuilt a lot of the parts on it, and he's got 5-gallon jugs of hydraulic fluid there to keep refilling the one that's leaking. So this will be a staged project, 1 lift at a time, approximately 6 weeks per bay. That will be out of commission. They'll take everything out of the bottom, the concrete, the motors and the lifts, replace them, and then it's 2 giant hydraulic lifts with arms that raise the bus. The total cost request is $976,000, but that has $127,000 worth of contingency, which is a little larger than usual. But once we dig that up, we're replacing electrical and hydraulic lines, so you don't know what you run into until you dig some of that up. So the estimated cost is $850,000, but we do have $127,000 worth of contingency built in, and it is part of the HGAC buy, which is similar to Buy Board. It is a consortium that we are a member of that will be purchasing that equipment from.
Board members, any questions on that?
Has that gone up from the original
Yeah.
request? Yeah, it looks like it's gone up about 300,000 from the original, from what I remember, because I think it was about 125 to 50,000 a lift, and now it looks like when you got 4, you're up to 225, so there's been a big increase in that, it seems like.
No, that's the original.
Is that the original that was in the packet that we looked at some time ago, a couple of months ago?
Yes, the only difference that it looks different is, so in your capital plan, you have $500,000 of new additional funds to fund it, plus we're using rollover funds from projects from last year. So
There's the difference.
right, so the funding looks different, but the quotes from the buy, HGAC buy, and the cost of the lifts are exactly the same.
I actually went and looked at these lifts because I couldn't believe they cost that much.
They're big. They're big.
Picking up buses.
Yeah, they're picking up buses.
They're in the ground, there's only one, the company we bought it from, the same company is bidding it because they fit in the ground without doing concrete work and do everything else, but there's another solution, but it's probably by the time you fill in the concrete and do all the rest of the stuff, you're gonna be up there anyway, but it was interesting to me that it was so much for a lift. But I went to see, and I saw.
Anyone else interested in bus lifts? No? Okay.
Legislative updates.
They're cool.
Did you want to,
Oh,
did you have anything to add to this strategic plan?
No, other than the one thing I appreciate most about sitting with this group of people at this table and across cabinet is I've served on many cabinets. None have been as tight in communicating the budgetary needs of the projects, and we work together closely as these things develop, so these conversations don't happen in isolation. So it's a very high-level picture, but we're already figuring out how we'll be able to fund those things, whether it's furniture at Pelican Island, if that's what's needed for classical, or the textbooks, or the curriculum. So although we don't have a lot of the specifics built in there yet, I can just assure you that those conversations happen daily with the people at this table, and they know we're here to support those projects as we don't just do new things, we drop off some other things and do some things differently. So those are how we manage those budget priorities.
Mr. Rosario?
So the budget implications on this particular item for the strategic plan, I guess when this is added, when budget implications are added onto our agendas for workshops in this area, are they going to be, what is the expectation? Because this is actually our second meeting doing this. So what's the expectation? Is the budget implications going to be specific to the item that's presented to us, or just a general implication of the budget as a whole?
I think in the last workshop, we had that conversation and
Yeah.
made the decision to add it as a part of the item as it is. I think because we're such at a high level still, but as we progress each month, the budget implications will become much more clear, which would give Bruce a higher level of response. So what I would anticipate happening, coming back at our next workshop as we summarize the feedback both from the board and other important stakeholders, we have the opportunity to make sure the board is aware of if we were to add this specific development plan, if we were to add this instructional strategy, we are adding cost, it would come at a cost of this. So I think as we move forward and become more specific, we're going to have more specific budget conversations.
So I do appreciate that, because then that helps me kind of figure out how to ask my questions specific to this particular item. But one of the conversations that we had at the last workshop, and I believe Mr. Dyer actually supported the idea, was to have a separate item on the workshop from this point moving forward for budgetary training, essentially, for an introduction to our budget as a whole moving into the budget process before it comes to us in July, right? So that every workshop, there would be a portion of it that Mr. Green would present to the board of, hey, this is what this particular part of the budget looks like and how it affects us, or something to that effect. So that, again, we're not showing up in July to approve the tentative budget and waiting on the one-day budget workshop where it's like you're given 500 pages of something and you're not part of the process of the budget that you're supposed to approve and know. And so I think every year we miss an opportunity to engage the board in that process, and that was part of the suggestion of adding a budget item on our workshop. I mean, in addition to the strategic plan, but I think separate to that, it benefits the public and it benefits the board for sure. Yes.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I to support understanding the budget. And I've been trying, as you know, from meeting with you and asking for some analytics to try to understand the budget more. I attended a workshop in Gainesville last week given by the Florida Association of School Boards on financial planning. And I is trying to understand the difference between government accounting standards and GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. And I can say that there's some things that's eye-opening, and the different thing here is the projection of revenue, which is the piece that really I think is the big part in our budgeting, which makes me think that what our job really is going to be. We can't control the revenue. The revenue is going to be, is what 4 stages of the budget where you give the original budget, the tentative budget, original budget, amended budget, and something else. I don't know, there's 4 different budget stages. But what I think is going to happen is whatever the trim notices come out and whatever the state allocation is and what our full-time equivalents of students are is really what drives our revenue. The revenue line we can't control. That is pretty well dictated through millage, through state funds, through the capital funds. And also, I was looking to see, is there anything that's fungible? Because I'd love to get more for teacher salaries, or more for innovation, or more for this. And what I've seen so far is that in government accounting standards, unlike the accounting standards that I'm used to, the money is much more specific and siloed. If it's in capital, like we've got capital loans that are coming up over the next couple of years, which are going to give us another $9 or $10 million. I said, great, let's put it over in operating and do some of the innovation. You can't. It's capital, but maybe you can buy chairs. So really what it looks like that our job is, as we go along with this, to me, and again, from my limited knowledge, being new to this, but it looks like that what our job is to figure out what's nice and what's necessary. And make sure we do the necessary things to support the strategic plan and to support the kids first. And the nice things are nice, but maybe we can't get to everything. So ours is more of an allocation of expenses to the things that are going to make a difference in kids' lives. Then if we could control the revenue more, if we had a way to control that, then we could print money or do something like the federal government does, then we'd have a much better shot. But it's a very interesting process to me, and I plan to dig into it, as Bruce knows a lot more, and I'm a little more dangerous now after understanding government accounting standards than I was beforehand. So, but I do agree, it's nice to know as we go through, when we talk about innovation and we talk about this, how are we going to fund it, and what does that mean? What are the things that we can live without? And what are the things that we've got to have to really reinvent the school system and make sure we support that?
It's very complicated.
It is.
And you hit the nail right on the head, because that's the purpose of the strategic plan. That's why it's so important for board members to say, these are the areas that we want to focus in on, that are going to be our goal areas. And then the superintendent makes it happen. So yeah, I think it's incredibly important for us to get into those conversations and to have, so I appreciate the support, and to have, a time slot or an area or whatever, that we can start to have those conversations moving into the budget area. And this is the time, because you're having those discussions in your office area level.
Just don't know what the revenue is.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Dr. Jones?
Very well said, Mr. Dyer, but basically, our budget comes down to the number of students we have in this district. And that's why the strategic plan and making our community aware of what we have and what we're looking at, and how we're trying to always build and create solutions instead of problems. I think it all ties together.
All right, moving on. So we are to our discussion, and we're going to start with legislative updates, and that's me. So Megan, who's back there, is going to bring up the Florida House website just quickly. This time in the legislature, this year is particularly interesting because there's so much going on in Tallahassee that's different than has happened in the last several years. without getting into the politics of it. Just know that some good things have happened with the website, and that is, you used to have to go to like the Florida House and look for a bill, and then you go down to the bill and then try to find the Senate companion bill and go over to the Senate's website. Now they both interchange. So you don't have to put in HB and then whatever, because all the House bills are odd, all the Senate bills are even. So you just have to put in a number, and then you can find the bill. Now, I would suggest, it's kind of hard to see because it's so small up there, but if you go to tracking, can you go there, Megan, on the right? Thank you. This is where you can sign up to have bills that you want to track. And so I signed up for this a couple years ago, and you're still signed up until you unsign up. So if you don't want to receive all the emails, you got to go back in there and untrack. But what's great about it is you can track specific things. You can track, I think they had a word search even, but you can track by just education bills, anything related to education. So I put in specific words that I wanted to track, and I get an email every time there's a bill that's submitted that has to do with education. And then anytime it goes to a committee, I get an email also. So I know what committee is going to hear it, where it's going to be. Now, there's another way you can look at it too, and that is to go to committees. So Megan, can you go to committees? And the committees have changed this year for the House. The Senate has kept the same names for their committees, and they've kept the word appropriations for all of the ones that have to do with budgets. But the House changed the word appropriation to the word budget this year. So instead of appropriation committee, they're just called budget committees because they said that's basically what we do. So if you look at the House committees, they have changed for education this year. And the reason why they changed the names is because of the focus of what they want to do for the leadership. So this year we have Careers and Workforce Subcommittee. We have the Education Administrative Subcommittee, and we have the Student Academic Success Subcommittee. That's where you'll see most of the education bills go through, but not always. Sometimes they'll go through a Healthcare Facilities and Systems Subcommittee if they have anything to do with healthcare, but yet they still affect students or schools. Sometimes you'll see them go, and then at the end, they all go through the Appropriations Committees, which is now called a Budget Committee. So if you look at the Pre-K to 12 Budget Subcommittee, that's the kind of the last stop. So when you go to look at a bill, it's important to see what committees the bill is going to. Before you get upset about a bill, because some bills can be upsetting, some bills you're extremely excited about, and before you get excited about a bill, you want to go look at the bill and see what committees are going to see it, okay? So if we can put in the bill number right up there, Megan, if you'll put in 261, and it's got a companion bill, 296, but 261 is the budget, is the House bill. And this is a bill that is extremely important to us as it comes up very slowly. And this is the school start time bill. And so this is one that we're really paying attention to because it's not only on our platform, but it's also on FSBA's platform. It affects us a lot in the next 2 years, and it's something that we need to pay close attention to is what's being proposed. Okay, there it is. It finally came up. Mine came up really quick. I don't know if it's because it's going to that. If you pull down and you look at the history or the bill, when you go to look at a bill, look at see what committees it's being referred to, and then also look to see one of the things that can kind of be interesting is the bill number too. If it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, those are like leadership bills. Those are going to move fast probably, or they're going to move at the end, but they're going to move quickly at the end. So that's one good thing to look at. The other thing that's interesting, this one has 2 subcommittees that are going to hear it. So when you have only 2 subcommittees, that's interesting as well. That means it's probably going to move quickly, or it's going to not move at all. So watch to see when the committee hears it, and it's kind of a giveaway in the very first subcommittee as to what's going to happen with the bill. You just listen to the subcommittee and how they're talking about it. Leadership's very involved in a lot of this. So this one's going to be seen by Education Administration Subcommittee and Education and Employment Committee. It's interesting because one of these committees is chaired by a St. Lucie rep that I know real well, Dana Trabulsi, and she's also the vice chair of the appropriations, well, the budget committee for pre-K to 12 too. So, and she is a big proponent of schools, and which is nice because she's sitting on that committee. The other thing to look at in this is it has to have a companion bill. So if there's a bill that you're worried about, look down to see if there's a related bill in the Senate. If there's no related bill in the Senate, it's not going to move, because you have to have two bills, one in the House, one in the Senate, that match each other pretty much. At the end, they must match. They must come together, and our budget has to be approved at the end. We're not one of those states that allows us to go into debt. We have to approve the budget, and it has to be balanced every year. So it's interesting to look at what's happening. The other thing to note is that not a lot of bills have been introduced yet, even though it looks like a lot of bills. That's not a lot yet. Bills will start to get introduced a lot as the committees start working, which they just started. The committees right now are just doing their introduction. They're talking about general stuff. They're talking about forming budgets. The governor just released his budget, so that's an interesting thing to look at as well. And then once there are cutoffs for a committee, for bills, and the cutoffs are different for the Senate than they are for the House. So when that cutoff happens, no more bills can be introduced. So you'll see a lot of bills being introduced from now for the next couple weeks, and then they'll stop. And when they start going into committee, that's when you kind of watch the bills and track the bills. We get bill trackers from a couple of different sources. We get them from FSBA, we get them from the Small Schools Consortium, and then there's another one that we get them from. Lobbyists are doing that. That's one of their jobs, is to track bills and send them to us. But one thing I noticed is FSBA's bill tracker did not include all of the education bills. Because I go through and I read every bill and I look to see which ones are education bills, and I notice that they're not including all of them. I think, I don't know why, but sometimes you kind of know, and they've been in the business a lot longer than I have as far as looking at bills, but sometimes you know when a bill's going to go and when a bill's not going to go. And so it's interesting to kind of watch the floor when you have general session and watch how these bills are talked about. And then when they go to committee, so subcommittees meet and then they go finally to the budget committee and then they go on. Same thing happens on the Senate side, and then the Senate might pass a bill and throw it over to the House, and then the House does something to it and sends it back, or vice versa. They have to meet, though, and approve the same bill, and it has to have the same language from both sides. Otherwise, it doesn't go. So it's a fairly long process to get a bill passed. You'll start to see a bill sometimes introduced, and then it fails one year, and then it's reintroduced the next year, and then it fails, and then it's reintroduced the third year, and they keep reintroducing it, hoping that they're going to see a different outcome. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So right now it's kind of in the beginning stages, but this is one that I think you should really pay attention to, because this one's going to affect us a lot. It's going to cost us, I don't know, what, have you even done the figures on how much it's going to cost us to change our school start times yet? Have you not read the law? So it's going to cost us probably a couple $1 million. Okay, so that's just one to really pay attention to and say, how can we adjust and make this happen, or adjust to whatever change is going to happen in the legislation this year? But we have another year and a half until we have to do the what is in law right now. But I know several districts have talked about this and the cost that's going to happen and the concerns. So this is one that you're going to hear talked about quite a bit this year in the legislature.
Thank you. Ms. Bamford?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I haven't used a new website, so that was good information. I'm on a couple FSBA committees and was aware when they put that through as far as letting the communities, letting the district decide the start time, and I hope that's what it will be, that the communities decide. And Dr. Moore, the information you have on the gallery now is giving people, more information that we're required to do, so that's good also. But I think hopefully this comes back to our communities.
Anyone else? Yes, Dr. Posca?
I would say probably the biggest legislative update from this session was really the immigration bill that we saw put forth by the legislature instead of taking up the governor's immigration bill. And I was very disappointed that I think all but maybe one legislator supported the legislator's bill over the governor's, including our own Indian River County representative. And, you know, the bill that the legislator put out was significantly weaker and really objectively was kind of a lie, like a bait and switch by the legislator. And I'll read a few of the problems with the bill. It failed to enhance the crime of registering to vote as an illegal alien. It did not prepare local entities to affirmatively assist with deportation efforts. It did not strengthen enforcement against gangs by expanding the definition of transnational criminal organizations. It did not require a person registering to vote to affirm under oath that he or she is a citizen of the United States and Florida. It failed to establish a state crime to enter the U.S. Illegally. It failed to address remittances and allows illegal aliens to send money back to their homeland country. It unconstitutionally removes the authority to enforce the law from the governor to a lower level cabinet agency, the Department of Agriculture, that does not oversee state law enforcement and whose stakeholders are likely in direct conflict of interest to illegal immigration. Additionally, it failed to put enforceable duty on state and local law enforcement to fully cooperate with immigration enforcement. So the bill put forward by the legislature was really a lie to the Florida people. It showed weak, limp-wristed leadership by Daniel Perez and the Florida leadership. And, you know, I was very disappointed to find out that our legislator voted in favor of the legislator's bill. You know, we need leaders that are going to stand for the American people, not big businesses who want to continue to hire illegal immigrants and bypass the new president's administration goals and objectives. So I think the biggest update from this legislative session is we have a weak legislator in the state of Florida. And there's a lot of people that need to be primaried.
Okay, so I was focusing more on education bills, but I understand your concern about that.
So if I could, you know, the illegal immigration issue significantly affects education and our schools. You know, we've seen likely the number of kids in our schools that are illegal immigrants continuing to rise. Which, you know, we are happy to help provide them with an education, but at a certain point, it does cost a significant amount of resources with potentially little input back into the system from these individuals. You know, additionally, the rates of infectious diseases like tuberculosis, hepatitis A are substantially higher and pose great risk to a lot of our kids. And there's a lot of aspects in addition to gang and drug trafficking that puts our kids at risk. So illegal immigration has a direct impact on education.
Okay, so another thing I want to point out on the website is the House schedule. So if you can go up to the top, Megan, and click on House schedule. So if you want to track any of these committees and when they meet, if you go pull down, you can click on any date on there and see, like, if you want to go to Tallahassee on a certain day, you can look to see what's going to happen committee-wise there, or you can go to the Florida channel and watch it. So you just click on that meeting and go to the meeting notice, and if you go to that meeting of the committee, there'll be a link even there to the Florida channel. So the great thing about Florida channel is not only can you watch live, but you can also go back and watch your recordings. So I went back and watched the House Session A, House Session B, Senate Sessions A and B, because it was quite interesting. I've never seen anything like that at the beginning of session, so I wanted to see it for myself. So it's been an interesting session already. It's just going to get more interesting, I think, as we go. But that's kind of just a legislative update as where we are right now. As the bills progress and bill trackers are tracking bills, I'll give you updates as we go on what ones to really pay attention to that are going to affect us that we have to put something into place specifically for. Okay?
Thank you. Thank
Yep. Ms. Rosario, board protocols.
Mrs. Berenborg, do you want to just do E? You have Thrive? Do you want to do it now?
Nope, I'll wait
Okay.
because I have to go to the restroom.
Okay, so board protocols is something that we have talked about, and we haven't set a date. So I put it on the board so that we could set a date and get this thing in motion. After talking with Ms. Envo, she said that she would be more than happy and willing and able and capable and all the other things of kind of sitting with us as a board and, you know, going through the protocols and seeing what needs to stay, what needs to go, how to correctly write it, and so on and so forth. And I think Mr. Dyer mentioned something about training, board training from Ms. Enville at some point. I think you mentioned it at one of our other
ethics
meetings.
training.
Yeah, I'm totally okay with it, but I think at a certain point, we've got to kind of nail it down and just say, okay, let's just do this. So we keep talking about it, but we're not, you know, putting it in motion. So my hope with training would just be general governance. You know, I've been in this is my 6th year. I don't think you can ever get too much of that. I mentioned Robert's Rules is always something that you can never get too much of because you learn something new all the time. Same thing with Sunshine Law. Like there's just things in there that is just, it's constant. So, yeah, I'm okay with any of them. And if the board is okay with allowing Ms. Enville to, you know, do the protocols with us at that same kind of sitting. I know that Ms. Enville mentioned something about it, you know, our session, if the board is okay with it, it doesn't have to be as formal as a workshop. And it could be something intimate, it could be something, obviously it's going to be a duly noted meeting, but it certainly doesn't necessarily have to be this kind of setting. So, Ms. Enville, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Yes, I've spoken to each of you individually about board training and what kind of things you want to see. I've developed a list of topics based on what I've talked about each of you about, and I'd be open to other topics as well. As a former teacher, I like the training aspect of it, and we can make it games, so we can kind of make it fun. There's no reason, like this formality of this is kind of not the purpose. I mean, be open to the public, but I envision us most in like a U shape or in a circle, so we could actually have discussions and I think a lot of times with your training, when we can apply it to a real life situation like a public records or Sunshine Law, I think that's really important. And we can learn a lot from other entities that have had some trouble and learn what not to do, which I think is good, and then also develop some good best practices for you all. So for instance, one of the things that I don't usually recommend that when I was at the county attorney's office or my school boards do, I don't recommend usually that each individual elected official send an email to everybody else because that could be, I mean, even if you say, oh, don't reply, you know, somebody's going to reply and it could be potential Sunshine Law violations. So if that's the case, you know, sometimes you can do it through your board staff or maybe, you know, through somebody else. But those are the kind of things that I think we can discuss in your protocols. Just need to know when you think you want to have them. I know some of you have, you know, different obligations, so I don't want to take your time. I know like coming in 4 times for an hour might be more difficult than coming in, you know, your ethics training I'll be happy to give to you because you can take it through FADS if you want, but you get to see me there too. You know, we can do it 2 hours at a time. We do it an hour at a time. We can do it before a meeting. You know, whatever kind of ideas you have. I mean, you can send it to me individually and we can kind of talk about it, or you can talk about it here.
Ms. Rosario?
Are you done?
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Dr. Jones.
Three of us on the board worked very hard on protocols and master board training a few years ago. It was really, really good information. I remember the protocols, I sent a template out to the board members and say, what do you like, what do you don't like? And that was led by FSBA, and I think we did pretty well on that. Obviously, Mr. Dyer and Dr. Paz can take a look at protocols too to see, before we go into that meeting, what do you think looks good and what would you improve? Now, the only question, well, one of the questions I have, will we play that Jeopardy like we do on the FSB?
Of course.
Okay.
But I
that's,
can make that specific to you all, which is good, because that's one of my favorite platforms. When I was a teacher, my husband had put me together like the peg and with the cup hooks and stuff, and we had done Jeopardy that way with my students. But now I have it, I can do it electronically. But
I mean, obviously, that's required by us every year.
Exactly.
But, to do an
Exactly.
update, even more specifically in tune to us, I think is important. And when I look back at ethics and protocols, and I think one of the things I really think of, and there's a lot of specifics with ethics and the professional code of conduct and reviewing that every year with staff and everyone, but bottom line for me is that you listen, you treat people with respect, and it's okay to disagree
absolutely.
with respect. And I think that's something, just in general, we can always listen to, not only as a teacher, a principal, or a board member, but yeah, I'm good with that. We've all had the training, obviously you have to have that by December, and then looking how it tunes into us.
And like you mentioned before, FSBA does a lot of good. Andrea Messina, she does some really good trainings
they
for
do.
you as a board too. So it doesn't all have to come from me.
Mr. Dyer?
Will the ethics training satisfy the state requirement?
Yes.
That you give us?
Yes.
Okay, good.
So you would have
So you
to
don't have
attend.
to do it online then?
No, you don't have to
Okay,
do it online,
okay.
but I would have to make sure that I'd take attendance so that you'd go to all
Yeah.
4 hours. And I have no problem giving you one-on-one training if somebody misses an ethics.
So
too.
would it count for this year, 2025?
It's a calendar year requirement,
Yeah, I
so.
like it.
Okay.
You could either watch
Just
video
did it,
or
but
we
okay.
can schedule a couple sessions and get it taken care of. Because there's very specific topics for ethics, and as you know, they're not always the most exciting topics. They're kind of, but they're important topics, and it's the same thing over and over because the rules really haven't changed much. But it's important that you're aware, so a refresher is always good. And so we can spice things up a little bit. We could do some pre-tests and post-tests and, be kind of fun.
Thank you.
Dr. Pasca, you have a comment about it?
Yeah, I'm definitely pro the ethics training in-house. I think that would be more engaging, and yeah, we should do it.
Okay, I have three comments. One, thank you, Christina Jacobs, for helping us last time. I know it was like herding cats, so I appreciate that.
But we did it.
And I need to adjust the name. It's not Jeopardy, it's Geoparity.
Geoparity,
that's
right, because we
right.
don't
I'm
want
sorry.
to
And,
face any challenges.
yeah, and the third one, you mentioned assessments.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So that'll be quite entertaining. Are you going to wear hats?
We could.
Oh, no.
I could channel my Brian Moore and wear different hats.
All right, thank you so much for that. Yeah, I'm all for it.
So we're going back to
So
member
dates.
Rosario's. Yes,
Yeah,
we're looking for
so
dates.
So, I mean, I know that most of us save Mondays, for our business meetings and our workshops. I guess we'll start with just throwing one out there and see what you all think. Not looking at a workshop day, February 24th is just a business meeting. So I don't know, Ms. Enval, are you thinking about, is it like our first session, a couple of hours, 1 hour, 4 hours, like what do you?
Not 4 hours, because then you would not be fresh for your
Right.
meeting in that evening. But we could do, I could do a refresher on public records or sunshine law just for an hour, just to see how it goes. And we
Right.
could tackle maybe the basics. I'm thinking in my head, I'm sorry, through the chair. In my head, I'm thinking we can probably pull together some sample protocols for you all to look at. So maybe we can do a hybrid of, let's do an hour on, sunshine law and public records, and then let's also then just start the reviewing of the board protocols.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I'm good with that. So I just threw out February 24th, which happens to be my birthday.
Nope. So we'll have
But-
cake too.
Yes. It's yours too, you said?
No, I said we'll have cake.
Oh,
There
we
okay. Thank you.
Can we wish you happy birthday early, because it's on my list of kind things to do?
You're just
I
trying
don't
to
know
get
if it'll
brownie
be
points.
happy.
Just try to
but
get
yes,
bingo.
you can. I'll accept it.
Okay,
I'll
good.
accept it.
All right, C, foreign exchange program.
Wait, we're still on
sorry.
the date. We're still talking about the date.
Can she send it to us, possible dates, and we can
Yeah,
respond?
just, we're
'Cause I don't
looking
have
for
my-
feedback. I
don't
know,
have my
but we're
schedule.
looking for feedback from board members. Are
Okay.
Mondays
So-
good for you before
So
a
I
board
have
meeting?
set aside every single day that you have a board meeting or a workshop, I have set aside my entire day. I don't schedule IEPT meetings or anything else for those days, so those are set aside just for you all. So I have no problem coming in and we can do that early. So if
Okay,
you
the
want
only
to do our first
concern-
one on the
The only
24th.
concern I have is I go to Tallahassee a couple times during legislative
Okay,
session.
so we have to watch that.
That's why I said, could you send them
I-
to us, and then I can
absolutely.
compare my schedules? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so wait, just to be clear, so Ms. Enville's going to send us some dates?
I don't know how
Or
you
do
want
you
to,
want-
do you usually, Madam Chair, do you usually keep your dates on your calendar? So can I work through Ms. Morey?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Will that be easier?
I'm okay with that. You all okay with
Together.
that?
That'll be easier than trying to coordinate your schedules, because I can't even
Talking
coordinate
about
my
the
own
24th?
sometimes, so
Are we talking the 24th?
maybe.
Possibly.
Okay, maybe
possibly first one
in
on the
afternoon.
24th.
I don't bring my phone to the dais, so I have to check afterwards in the two
Okay.
phones and figure it out.
We'll put together 2 or 3
All right,
dates
thank
to get
you.
started.
So foreign exchange program?
Yeah, so thank you for that, Ms. Enville and board members. Let me pull that other one up. Okay, so foreign exchange program. So some of you know that I host foreign exchange students. If you don't, I do. And it's been a wonderful experience. All of the kids that I have hosted have attended charter high school. And I have had conversations with Dr. Moore for the last probably 2.5 years on our foreign exchange program here at the district level. And it got to the point that Dr. Moore said, well, charge me with the research. So here it is. So I'm put together some information here for you all to to get some feedback, and hopefully we can get some support on this. The first thing is to discuss our foreign exchange program policy. We have a policy, I included it all in the backup. We have a policy on the foreign exchange program, and it hasn't been updated in a very long time. So I did other research on the policies from other school districts, and I found one from Osceola County, Broward County, Lee County, Miami-Dade County, St. Johns County, and I don't think I got anyone else. So I included those also in the in the backup. I also included 2 statutes that pertain to foreign exchange students. They really don't have any, the way that I read it, they really don't have any direct impact on policy building. So it doesn't seem like there's anything in there that would directly, need to be in our policy. Of course, I'll, hand it all over to Ms. Enville, and hopefully, Ms. Enville could do the, run it through legal sufficiency. And then I also included a recommendation for a new policy using St. John's as a template. But just before taking a look at that, the foreign exchange program in public schools, it offers so many benefits to students, both the foreign exchange students and our current students. The first and foremost is cultural awareness and global perspective from students who could potentially be from all over the world. I've had students from Brazil and from Germany, and in my household with my son and with his immediate friends, they have built what I'm hoping to be lifelong friendships, and language and food and all those kinds of things all play a part in developing relationships with kids from other countries. Language skills, personal growth, independence, academic enrichment, career advantages, friendships, connections, increased tolerance, open-minded, diversity. You also have students who participate, obviously, in our sports programs. A lot of the students who are foreign exchange students in charter actually participate in the sports already in Vero Beach High School and in Sebastian River High School, as well as Masters Academy. So they are a little bit all over the county. And it's just a really, really wonderful opportunity for us to potentially fill some seats that we might be missing, right? Seats of students who might go elsewhere because of school choice. We might have availability in our schools that we can fill them. And again, why not? If we have an opportunity to do this and to do it well, I think it'll cultivate excellence and really facilitate a spirit of, cooperation, and ultimately these kids participate in our schools. So many of them, just their academics far exceed, believe it or not, where we are as a nation versus what other countries are doing, are significantly different. So anyway, so that is this item. Ultimately, the request is to allow the superintendent to take this information and do research, right? Let him and Ms. Envil take a look at the policy. Let them give Dr. Moore an opportunity to explore the feasibility and the benefits of establishing a really robust foreign exchange program here in our district, and then report back to us on what those findings are. So that is this item. I'd be happy to take a look at the proposed policy right now, which really, if you want it, really just highlights the biggest thing that was my takeaway was that it highlights an organization that is the standard in the state of Florida. And it is it's CSIET, and it stands for Council on Standards for International Educational Travel. That is standard throughout, and this organization is approved by the Florida Department of Education to be the entity that vets the foreign coordinated organizations that bring those students in. So if we were to go this route and really create a robust foreign exchange program, we can't engage in a partnership with an organization that's not already vetted through this council. So that's the only thing that has to, in my opinion, stay in the policy. It's in our current policy anyway, and it's standard in all the other policies as well. So other than that, I'd be happy to open up the floor to discuss this.
Board members, Mr. Dyer.
My question is this funded? Does it cost us money? Do we get state FET or FTE?
Through the chair, if the students in our school, yeah, we would get funded for those particular students. I don't think what Ms. Rosario is asking here is to really go through the process, evaluate the man hours, the power it would take in order to build a robust program. For me personally, if you know my story or my daughter's story, cultural awareness is just ingrained in terms of who they are because of where they live. So any opportunity to expose our students to higher levels of diversity, I think is a great strategy. But I think doing this, this isn't a big ask, it's relatively straightforward, and that I can bring the information back to the board and say, in order to have a true robust program that would in some ways compete with the charter high school, because they have a really good program based on my limited understanding. This is what it would cost for us, but I don't think we can have an answer regarding the volume of time or resources it would take until we do this initial evaluation and bring it back to the board, which I'm happy to do.
Okay, I think it's a great idea if it fits in with the IB school or there's something within your strategic plan, but because it's great, but in the hierarchy of needs, It's just how this fits in. I'm glad to know that it wouldn't cost us money we'd still get the FTE equivalent, but it's the question of, your time and your priority within the whole school district innovation. But great idea. I think it's terrific. I think in the IB program certainly would add some richness to it. But again, that's, to me, is more on your time, your effort, and all the innovation, all the things that are going on. Can we devote the time to really do it right, or is it just being done? So that would be it.
Dr. Jones?
Thank you. Dr. Moore, how many students do we have, foreign exchange students now in our school? Do we know? 5? Okay. I went to a charter high school production last week, and Mr. Zychek and I have a call tomorrow because I know Ms. Aversa used to be their foreign exchange representative there. I don't know if she retired, or so they devoted one person to that, you know what I mean, as far as the workload and so forth. When I was at Splash River High School, we had a few each year. We had some problems with a couple of the programs we had to regroup with as far as the housing for the students to make sure they were safe. And so that's something obviously we would have to look at. When I look at our policy, what is it exactly? I mean, it's pretty standard, but what is exactly would be changing? And like Mr. Dyer said, this is something that would be nice, and it would be FTE. There's a lot to it, and I dealt with that at the FHSAA also, and foreign exchange students coming and playing sports. Lots of paperwork. So again, time served. How would we handle this? And as far as what has been said about the culture, I think it'd be great for our kids too. But I want to make sure we're prepared, and I'm going to follow up with Mr. Zychek to get more specifics. Thank you.
Dr. Pasca?
Yeah, I would generally support a foreign exchange program. It sounds like we do have one in some form already. So, obviously we want it to be done well, and in general, I would support it. It's not on my list of priorities right now. We have a lot going on, but in general, I do support that.
Yeah, I have housed a foreign exchange student, from Switzerland. Quite interesting, very educational, what I learned from the students. So it's a back and forth. They learn from us, we learn from them. It's great. I also was, when my parents were older, or when I was younger, my parents had a foreign exchange student from Brazil. So I got to learn how to speak Portuguese for a little while. So I think it's a great opportunity for people to understand different cultures. The only question I have is, I see we have a limit of 5 in our policy right now. What is the capacity at Vero Beach High School right now, and what's the capacity at Sebastian River High School right now? Do we have the seats? Because I don't want to take away seats from our students.
In the high schools, we don't have a space issue.
Regarding adding students.
Okay, so even though Vero Beach High School, sometimes I hear about we're overflowing.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm all for it.
Okay.
Okay.
Overflowing at
Ms.
Vero.
Rosario?
Yeah, just to follow up, so I did look into the FTE, and it would not hurt us at all in that particular situation. And as far as the questioning of the policy, basically it's just updating our policy, because the last time it was adopted was 2014. And so I've just made some recommendations that I could see that just seem to make sense. Obviously, Ms. Enville will have the final say on what that would look like legally. But yeah, there was one thing in here. It said on the old policy, it said each high school may accept a minimum of 5 foreign exchange students at any given time. That to me seems very limited. If we have the seats and the availability, and it's not costing us, in regards to FTE, why are we limiting to 5? And so other school districts do not have that language in there. What they do have, and I included that in here, which is letter U, where it is the principal's discretion to accept or deny application requests. So the principal would know how many seats are available, how many aren't, and ultimately, in my opinion, it would be up to the principal to be able to say that. I will say I'm going to add, just as a caveat with regard to discipline. So some people would say, you know, what would happen in terms of a student who misbehaves, does something illegal, engages in bullying, you know, who's from another country. And going by my experience with charter high school, any kid who, they have like a point system, so they have their own regular points, their own regular discipline system. Every student in our school district, including foreign exchange students, are required to follow all of the policies that we have here at the school district. It doesn't change. The only thing that changes with them, as far as I'm concerned, and this is where you would do the research on this, is that anything egregious, they automatically get sent back. So there was a student that was engaged in some bullying that was really outlandish. And literally the next day, the kid was on the plane back to their country. So they don't play any games. And that's something that would occur with the contracting of, you know, this council that helps put this together. About housing, regarding housing, the good thing about housing is that the schools are not responsible for getting the housing for the students. It would be the coordinator or that organization that is already vetted. They are the ones that select or that, you know, get the volunteer people who want to house the students. And it's really not up to the school or the district, so that's not a, you know, heavy load or a lift for the school district in that. I mean, obviously, we want to work in good terms with the coordinators to make sure that everybody's on the same page and you know who the emergency contacts are. But for those people who accept coming to our school district and our public schools, we would be sure to get all of those, you know, dot our I's and cross our T's with all of the to-dos in that. And of course, I trust that Dr. Moore will do a thorough job in the research of this. So Dr. Moore, thank you so much. And I would be happy to put this on the next board meeting to make it official, and then you just bring it back to us when you're ready.
Just a couple comments. It would be good for the principal to approve or not approve looking at that, but as far as we're not responsible for getting the student the housing, when there's a problem with the housing, it comes to the principal. And I dealt with that several times. So again, whatever program it is, we just have to be very, very clear on our expectations, because it would be students coming to me about the issue with housing. And then I would contact that person and it became an issue. So whatever we're doing, we have to be specific.
Okay, next item.
Okay.
Classical school name?
Okay, so classical school name. So we have, let me get my thing. So a couple of things here. As of our last board meeting, there were some discussions on the classical name and the timing for it. Dr. Moore provided a time of March, the beginning of March or the first 2 weeks of March. I forget exactly what he said. And so Dr. Moore, I went back to our October 21st business meeting. I would encourage all of you to watch that business meeting. And the transcript will prove that as of that October meeting, there was unanimous support from the board to receive Dr. Moore's recommendation to have a name within 2 weeks from that meeting. So the plan from that meeting moved. Now, granted, it wasn't a charged item in terms of it wasn't on the actual, it wasn't a voting, the date wasn't a voted item. But there was a conversation, a very in-depth conversation that went back and forth. Dr. Moore said that we can do it in 2 weeks. I can definitely do it from this board meeting to the next board meeting. It will take some coordination, but I can't say that it can't be done because because the reality is we literally just did it. And of course, Dr. Jones provided some support on that and said it's really not hard, we can get it done. And at the very end of the meeting, a few things, went back and forth with some dates, but the 2 weeks kept coming up. At the very end, once we approved the plan moving forward, the plan that was presented to us, I said to Dr. Moore, I'm not opposed, I really just need clarity. Once we approve this, if it's approved tonight, Dr. Moore, are you going to bring us another item that the work group will, whatever the name is, that the work group recommends clearly? So we are actually going to have another correct voting item in November. Dr. Moore said yes, because I have to follow board policy. Yes, ma'am. So at the very latest, we should have had a name in November, not March. I'm bringing this up, but, so I wanted to clarify that. And then the other thing that I wanted to clarify was March was not on the agenda. We didn't get anything in November, and in December when we talked about it again, when I talked about it again, we didn't have a name. It kept getting pushed off, pushed off. I'm very happy to say that today we received an email from Dr. Moore saying that we are now engaged in the process, and the process won't begin in March, that it will begin this week, starting this Wednesday, with a community forum that will take place at Pelican Island Elementary School to begin the process for the name. So I am happy about that. We just received that email this morning. So that's one of the items that I had on the board, agenda, not foreseeing that we would get this email. So I'm happy about that. I'm happy that we're getting the ball rolling. We really should have had this way earlier, but here it is. So that email this morning, my question is, with the next date, I'm looking here, the work group, so the community forum will be on February 12th. I guess I'm seeking clarity on this, right? What I'm reading is the community forum will begin on February 12th, Wednesday, February 12th, and then a work group will convene on February 17th with the goal of submitting the work group's recommendation to the board prior to the February business meeting. So at the end of this month, at our business meeting, we are going to have a recommended name. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Are we going to then have the top 3 or just one recommended name?
We will provide everything on behalf of the work group. So I don't want to give you a count or a specific number. So whatever the work group provides us with, the superintendent will provide that recommendation to the board.
Okay. So I appreciate that, and I'm glad that we're going to have that in February and that you're not starting this in March. Super happy about that. Thank you so much. The other thing that I was going to suggest also, and something that caught my attention, was how fast this is moving. And I wanted to thank you for the inclusion of the curriculum in the email. Board members, if you haven't read it yet, there's a listing of some curriculum reviews that seem to be the ones that we are going to adopt, I believe, or leaning towards or reviewing. These are all classical curriculum, classical math, which is for the public, Singapore math, great books, which would be the literature portion, reading literature. Explode the Code is a fantastic, highly recognized curriculum that really focuses on, I really like this one, and Ms. Besora might appreciate it too, because it's an Orton Gillingham-based program, which is really used a lot with children who are dyslexic, using phonics with multisensory activities. So That's a fantastic program right there. Then there's New American Cursive Penmanship, which is very, very important to get kids to learn penmanship. And script, and of course, Story of the World is another really, really great classical curriculum. So I'm very happy with these. I hope that we definitely move in this direction. I know I didn't see science in here, and I know that you're still in the process, but I do sincerely appreciate including that in this email. So thank you for that. So if I can go to my next thing on the same topic, and then we'll open it up for board members, if you don't mind. The other thing, because this is moving so fast, I realized that the transition plan that we approved in October, I don't know if it's not updated, obviously. So I've had some parents, and I get it, right? I've had some parents say, I don't understand the K-8. Because they were told in the transition plan that that the sixth grade, the middle grades, are not going to begin until 26. Meanwhile, we have an updated expansion of our K-8s, which happened in January. So on that one, we're saying, no, we can definitely do Pelican Island as a middle grade 6 for, grade 6 for this year. So is there a way that we can kind of tighten this up and kind of create maybe a revised transition plan for just the classical so that we can kind of tie these together and there aren't two different things that wouldn't contradict one and another, so the community is clear and we're clear and we can say, okay, hey, this is the plan moving forward?
Through the chair, we will provide that revised plan at the community forum so that they
Perfect.
understand where we've been and where we're going.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And those are really my items here, so I don't know if board members, you want to?
Any other board members want to speak to that? Yeah. Dr. Jones?
Yeah, looking back at the meeting and Ms. Enville's email after the last meeting, one thing that I said several times is follow the policy. And in the email, I remember Dr. Moore did state, or in the recording, that, once he has the parents, we could move quickly, and you can move quickly once you get the forum and you get the work group. Again, I've done this. Once you get that going, but if you didn't know who your parents were, you really couldn't move forward because you wanted to make sure you had the ones who were coming and wanted to meet with the parents, and which we're doing Thursday. And when talking about curriculum, and I think this is a time too, Dr. Jacobs and Dr. Shafty, when we look at our magnet schools in general, and we have the classical curriculum, again, reviewing that myself this weekend. We also look at how we can update their curriculum. We're talking about the core curriculum at Rosewood Magnet, math and science at Osceola, and then, the IB elementary at Liberty Magnet, which, as Dr. Moore said earlier, that's a real good pathway for the North County. And that was something the North County, I was there 11 years as principal, they really grabbed onto. So, and I did say this could move fast once we know who the parents who wanted to be there, which we have Thursday, and then you can get that work group going and make sure that you're on your way. But you've got to make sure you have the involvement with the parents. But that's something I want to look at, when we open K-8s and when we look at everything else, don't forget all the other schools out there, making sure, I know you're the innovative lady, so making sure that we update those and continue to focus on everybody. Thank you. Isn't that your new title?
Yeah, thank you for the update. The email was very helpful. I know we're all anxiously awaiting more information always, and I know you guys are working hard on it. But this was an excellent update, so we appreciate it.
You good? Okay, I'm good as well. All right, moving on. We are on E, update on Thrive. So I recently met with Carrie Lester, who's in the audience today, and Kylie Matawala. And Thrive, what used to be called Substance Awareness Center. I know you've changed your names a couple of times since I've been in office. You've also changed your location, although you've kept a lot of your old locations. They have now moved into the old doctor's clinic, and a beautiful space that you're going to have there. And she provided me with this folder and then brought them up to the district office so you all would have a folder of everything that they do and all their information. But I want to point out a couple of things. First of all, thank you for that Family Fun Fest. I've gone every year. I think one year I couldn't go because I was out of town. But I brought my grandkids, and they said this was the best one yet. Although I just heard we had a petting zoo, and I never saw it. It was behind the bounce house.
It was great.
I don't know how I missed it, but I missed it.
It was cool last year.
Yeah, so wonderful event. The Spiro that was inside, my grandson wanted to do it. I tried to explain to him he had to be in school first. So it was exciting for kids to see the potential of what's out there, and also getting a chance to listen to lots of different community representatives. I learned from a couple of different booths that I hadn't been at before. Moonshot gave out the most amazing bags, and it was just a great event. So thank you for putting that on. We appreciate it. There are a couple things in here that I wanted to point out that Carrie brought to my attention. Couple things. One is this sheet right here, the long sheet that says Thrive at the top of it, highlights from the opioid and substance use community needs assessment. So it was kind of eye-opening to hear about, you know, all the things that are going on just in our community as far as this goes. It goes hand in hand, you know, with homeless issues and drug abuse issues. And so this is an interesting sheet to look at. The other one that she brought up was the Florida Youth Substance Abuse Survey. So this survey had been traditionally given to students for years and years and years, and then we put in an opt-out policy, and thinking that, you know, we get less responses from students because of that. Actually, they got the most responses they've ever gotten this past year, which was good, because they got information from students about what they believe is happening and about them. And so it's kind of interesting to look at like the rates of lifetime and past 30-day alcohol use, all the different THC issues, depression. This one's kind of interesting, I thought, and sad. Female students were twice as likely to have made a suicide plan or attempt suicide compared to males. Kind of interesting things that students are putting on there. But notice that the trends are going down. So vape marijuana, vape nicotine, marijuana use, alcohol, cigarettes, all kind of going down, but this is also their perception of that. So as in the use or the trend of use, it's quite interesting. I would reach out to them for more specific information. And this is good data to look at with our sister report to say, are we doing the right things? Are we attacking mental health the way we should? Are we looking at what our counselors are doing in our schools and how they can help with our local, because this is local data. This is coming from our students and our community. So it's quite interesting to look at the perception of great risk of harm by substance and things, what the kids perceive. That's what this is. Dr. Jones?
Thank you. I had the opportunity to go to the ribbon cutting for Thrive and then met with Ms. Lester and Kylie, and it's really interesting, especially for me, the perception of great risk of harm by substance. Seems like we've got cigarettes under control, and then you look at some other issues, what they think is more, you know, great harm. I'm thinking, oh, yeah, that's their perception. Dr. Pasco, you got to look at this because
Yeah, I saw it, yeah.
I'm thinking, you know, I had cigarettes under control at the high school, then something else popped up. And then I had this, and then something else popped up. Vaping,
Vaping's huge.
yeah. When I came back in 17, 18, something about juke, what are those called, jukes?
Jules?
Jules, that's close. Anyway,
You
it
don't
was
see
something
those
new to me. I hadn't been in the high school for a while. I'm like, holy moly, but even what they think is great risk of harm concerns me, you know?
Well, interesting, one of the things that I kind of look at is how many adults are vaping in front of kids. And, you know, back in the day when the cigarette was cool, you saw it in movies and you saw it on TV, and all the cool guys were smoking cigarettes. So of course, if you wanted to be cool, you had to smoke cigarettes. We even had a smoking area designated in our high school for kids to go smoke. So times have changed, which is good, but I'm still hearing over and over again about kids vaping right in the classroom. And it's still going on. It's still an issue. I know the principals, when you talk to them about what's your biggest problem, it's vaping, still vaping. So whether or not it's the kids' perception or what reality is, it's kind of interesting to look at both of those and compare them, because what the kids perceive and what reality is sometimes is not aligned. So it's kind of interesting stuff. Did you want to say something, Dr. Costa?
No, I'm glad you're bringing it up. I mean, I know we have programming and interventions that we're doing, obviously, at many different levels, and this is always something that we have to look at how we can do it better, and maybe there's room for innovation in how we try to reach our kids and encouraging them not to use these substances, especially vaping, which is going to be a huge health burden on these kids as they grow older. But it's obviously a big issue for us. And I know, we didn't bring this up, but I know naloxone, or the reversal agent for opiates, is something that's commonly discussed by school boards and school districts. There are school districts where this makes sense to employ because there's a higher risk of opiate overdose. But in our district, I'll just say, even though it's not a topic that you brought up, I would probably not recommend it in our district, having that available by staff to give, because A, the risk that we have is pretty low. I'm not aware of us having an opiate overdose in school yet. I don't think we've had one.
I don't think we've got
And the drug, most people are trained, for instance, law enforcement is trained to use it. They have it on them most times. Unfortunately, the training is lacking, and it's considered to be a harmless drug, but it is not. It has a rare, but you'll eventually see. I mean, I've personally administered Narcan hundreds of times, and you know, I've watched many people die in front of me from opiate overdose. But there is some risk with naloxone and ventricular fibrillation, and I've had probably 2 people that went into VFib and died from that drug. So you know, there is some risk when it's used. Obviously, if they are an opiate overdose, it makes perfect sense to go do it. But since we are in a low-risk environment, I wouldn't recommend, as a district, we employ naloxone in our schools to have available for staff. If there's any emergency, you dial 911 and follow the ACLS protocol and get the AED and just do everything. And if they need naloxone, EMS or a police officer can administer it very quickly. So for our district, it doesn't really fit. There's obviously other districts where naloxone makes a lot of sense to have in schools.
So I did inquire about that, who had it and who was able to give it, and I believe it was just SROs, correct? Yeah, only the SROs have it and
In our
have been
district.
trained to give it
Yeah.
if, in case of an
Right.
emergency.
And I think that makes sense. I think that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Just one thing,
Yes.
one thing I again wanted to thank Ms. Lester and her staff. If you have time to go over and look at that, just all the mental health assistance there will be for students, community members and so forth. I think it's just so important, and you look at that, how it was compared to the old offices, just very welcoming, where people feel safe, where there's counseling, getting help when they need help. It's going to be a great thing for our community. Thank you.
Ms. Rosario?
So thank you so much for this information. I have a few questions about it. First, I think it's very important for us to take a look at the stats. I'm pleased with the low number, considering the low number of what looks like here, the percentage of Indian River County students reporting symptoms of depression and 1 or more suicide attempts within the past year. I guess relative to the number of kids who actually took the assessment, at first glance, I know Dr. Posca would be able to, weigh in on what I'm saying, but other than the seriously considered, all the other ones seem fairly I guess, low. Although even one is cause for concern. But I guess statistically, if we're talking statistics, that's really what I was just looking at the chart and seeing at first glance. My questions are about the assessments and the surveys that were given out to 451 students from 3 middle schools and 502 students from 6 high schools in our area. That's a lot of students, and so I'm wondering, how was this survey given out? Does anybody know?
Well, we can't invite them up because it's a workshop, so my suggestion would be that perhaps.
Could, if, as the chair, the board is okay with it.
I understand. Ms. Lester, are you ready to answer that?
I can, on the Florida Youth Substance Abuse Survey?
Yeah, if you'd like to come up, you need to be in front of a mic. I just didn't want to put you on the spot. Are you comfortable with this?
It's all good.
Thank you so much, I appreciate it.
The Florida Youth Substance Abuse Survey is a joint effort between the Department of Education, the Department of Children and Families, the Florida Department of Health. It's a combined effort through those departments to administer the survey.
Oh, no. Sorry. Oh, no.
So we, in fact, do not administer the survey. It is a statewide survey that gets administered.
And how is that administered? How do you,
We get
How-
the results through the state. We specifically don't administer the survey. It comes through the Florida Department of Education, the Florida Department of Children and
so
Families.
I'm wondering, Dr. Moore, how were our students given this survey?
Probably on their desk.
I'm not 100% sure. I gotta get the information. I think we pushed it out. I think the survey you're referring to was a few years ago in which we were not sending out that particular survey.
Yeah.
I believe this actually came from the Florida Department of Education to do.
Can you report that back and let us know?
Yeah.
Because I also would like to know how we can get our hands on the actual questions that were given to the students, and the process, because I don't know of any parents who were aware. Parents have to give their permission before taking surveys and assessments in this manner. So I don't know if we have 451 permissions. Do we have 502 from the high school permissions from parents?
Well,
If
some of
so,
those
I'd
high
like to
schools
know
aren't
where those were and who, how was that coordinated for the permissions to be given? Okay? The concern that I have is that a few years ago, to be completely clear, there was a survey that was sent out to students asking incredibly inappropriate sexual questions of the sexual nature, and asking students, which I don't even mind mentioning, asking students questions about, during the past 3 months, with how many people did you have sexual intercourse with? And this was all and this wasn't from, I don't believe this was from you, this was from the Department of Health, actually. And so when you say that, it was a combination effort with the Department of Health, I'm concerned. And parents didn't know that students were given this particular, now again, this was several years ago. The last time that you had sexual intercourse, did you or your partner use a condom?
Ms. Rosario, can we wait until we get the survey information to go back over the questions or whatever
I'm not
concerns you
going
have?
over questions.
So we
I'm
don't have to
talking-
bring up old
I can
stuff?
assure you this is a separate,
It's
that is a
different.
different survey.
Yes.
Those
So
questions.
my-
It's not the same survey.
So my point is, I'm just concerned about the question types, just to, ask where they came from and were parents given the opportunity. I know this one in particular that I'm referring to, which again is not, I'm not suggesting that that's this one that you have in front of us, that those were, that one in particular from a couple of years ago was actually, was actually removed and banned essentially.
Right, just
However you would.
as a level of clarity, this is not that,
Yeah.
not that at all.
It's
These
not
are
that.
actually schools selected by the Florida Department of Education, in which a form for permission is connected through the Department of Education, so.
Well, that's
like
what I want to
said-
make sure.
The
Yeah.
survey is
Yeah.
vetted by the Department of Education.
Yeah, and
Well-
I'll provide all that information.
Well, that's what I'm glad to hear that. If it's vetted by the Department of Education, I'm glad. So just know that that's really where my concern is coming from. That said, I do appreciate this entire packet of information because it is really telling, and it certainly will help us moving forward, and I appreciate the work that you're doing.
And if I just might add, I mean, I think it is news worth celebrating if we look at what our substance use rates have looked like in the past in this community and what we've been able to see in the past decade. And if
Yeah.
you go back even further, we had significantly high rates of substance use. And so that is a community effort. It is our school district investing in prevention and partnering with the community to do
I think it's a great thing. Thank you so much for your efforts.
Can you stay there 1 second, because I want to ask you one other thing. In the past, we've had vape proclamations in October, and now we've switched that to March, correct? So we're having you come back in March to do that proclamation. I've asked the superintendent if he would mind letting you do a little presentation on Thrive and what you do and how we get this information out to our kids so that we do see these numbers decreasing. Okay? We'll give you that platform.
Would love to do that.
Okay, thank you.
One thing, as a member of the Executive Roundtable and Communities That Care, and we just met a couple weeks ago at the Environmental Learning Center on what our focus will be, this kind of information is good for our community. This is saying, okay, this is going pretty well, we've got to work on this, like Dr. Pascal said, different areas. So I just find this invaluable for us as a school district, because here's what our kids are thinking, and here are the stats, you know what I mean? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And-
okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you for the survey and being willing to sit up here and tell us about it. I appreciate it. We appreciate the work you do, and I also want to just bring up another local, an individual who also is a abuse and substance specialist, George Collin. I don't know if anybody is aware of him, but I know he's very interested in giving back and seeing how he can help our schools tackle substance abuse. So he may be another resource that we could use in these schools in some sort of imaginary way to help these kids, because he has a huge passion for people with substance abuse problems.
And thank you for coming up and being on the hot seat, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Dr. Peggy Jones mentioned communities that care, and the prioritized risk factor with communities that care for our community became family engagement. And
Right.
so our partnership this weekend for the Family Fun Fest was one way to bring our families out, engage those families, and get them the resources that they need. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are on to F, board chair script.
Okay. Let me get my items here. Okay, so board members, you have several documents back up on your, for this item, and many of which were provided in an email by Ms. Envil, which I'm extremely grateful for her work on this. I think this was really a collaborative effort to try to fix some of the items that are here based on based on some case law that was recently passed. And so as a result, our participation protocol policies in our board meetings and the citizen comment portion, citizen input, and of course the speakers forum needed to be updated. Ms. Envil really did amazing work on this. I don't know, Madam Chair, if you want to have the superintendent begin or Ms. Envil, and then we can provide feedback, because I have some suggestions for some areas that I found that I think needs a little bit of tweaking. So it's up to you how you want to proceed.
Well, I think you've presented us with this in an email form, right? and all board members have it. So why don't you just direct us on what it is that you think that we need to change?
Okay, so let's pull up then the policy participation at board meetings policy 0169.1. And Bruce, Mr. Green, this item is also on an item that you had with grant funds. Remember that packet of policies that are coming to us? This is the same item that's in that packet of policies. I think it was under your items.
I went ahead and added the proposed revisions to the policies because I wanted you to see what the proposed revisions were as you compare them to what the chair's script could be, as you compare to what those citizen input guidelines would be, because I thought it's important that they all three match. And just as a little bit of background, I think I sent it to you in email already, but it's the Moms for Liberty case from October 8th of 2024. It was an order from the panel of the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. It essentially says that parts of a school board policy targeting abusive, obscene, and personally directed speech was unconstitutional and violated the First Amendment, finding that the first prohibition was viewpoint-based, so that would have been abusive. The second, which was obscene, was both unreasonable and vague. And the third, which was personally directed, was application of the third was at minimum unreasonable. So you'll see in the proposed revisions that we followed that Neola proposed for you, it now changes that language in there and actually gives you a definition of obscene, threatening, and abusive. So it makes it be consistently applied, because as it was not being consistently applied. And a lot of our districts had the same exact language. So now that we have that case ruling, we're trying to make sure that they are consistently applied. And we realized it, as you remember, we realized it sitting in that meeting when you were reading it out loud. I remember leaning over to Dr. Moore saying, oh, we need to change that. So that's what I've tried to do for you. I've tried, and Madam Chair, I did try to make your script a little bit shorter, but
That's what I've requested, please.
Yes, I tried.
It's painful to read.
It is. It's
I
easier.
understand the lawyerese behind it, but it's very painful to read.
In your I did a red line of your citizen input guidelines, and I think that's what's posted on the website. But I also sent to you individually the clean version, so you can eliminate all the red line noise, because sometimes it's very hard to read through things that are redlined. But essentially, the citizen input guidelines, your script, and the citizen input form, the speaker's form that they fill out, has been revised so they're all three consistent with the proposed policy language. Now, everything's going to change if we need to revise the policy language as well. I thought this was a good opportunity to bring it forward because Member Rosario had brought it up.
No, definitely. I think it's very important. I don't see, though, when you said the definition of obscene that is provided in the court case, I just don't see that here in the policy.
So in the policy, it's under additional rules of decorum and conduct, and it's subsection E. And the proposed versions will now read, the presiding officer may stop, interrupt, or warn. And if you remember, it said interrupt, warn, or terminate, which was a little,
I didn't like that word.
A little harsh. And then it goes into an obscene statement may include, but is not necessarily limited to, language or gestures that are crude, abusive, vulgar, offensive, pornographic, or indecent. And then a statement that is threatening in nature is one containing language meant to frighten or intimidate one or more specified persons in believing that they may be harmed by the speaker or someone acting at the speaker's behest. And an abusive statement shall be understood to mean containing language that is harsh, insulting, cruel, or malicious.
So how would this then, because the obscenity statute, 847, has a slightly different definition of obscenity. And so obviously this is in language and in behavior. The other one is really talking about everything else with regard to children. So how do we decipher between the both this is a great definition. I'm just wondering, should we also just say, also see obscenity statute 847, or
So
no?
I think they're, Madam, I'm
Two
sorry, through the
different things?
chair. I think they're two different things. I think
Okay.
it's a perfect example of how your statutes don't always, they're not always matching.
Right.
I think it's different as applied to obscene, as you're saying in that statute, as it is applied to a meeting.
Okay, all right, that's clear, thank you so much. All right, so in this one, board members and Ms. Enville, on the bottom, first page, very last paragraph, language, the beginning says reasonable public notice, but on that last line, it reads, except in the case of emergency or special meetings, notice should be provided at least 7 days. I think that should be must, but I'm not sure. That's why I'm asking you.
Through the chair, if I may. So that language comes specifically from section 120.525 of your Florida statutes, which is under your chapter 1 of your rulemaking. And it's also the same exact language, notice should be provided at least 7 days, as in your policy 0164, 0165, 0165.1. So that's why they all match.
Okay, so should is good.
Should is good, yes. But so it's interesting because, you know, sometimes I prefer shall or must because that's mandatory. Should is, and I think in this case it should because there might be instances where you have to provide less than 7 days notice. It might be some sort of emergency or something that's unforeseen.
Got it.
So in this particular case, I think it's good for you because it gives you that leeway in case there's some catastrophe or something that happens. I mean, honestly, you guys do a great job of posting everything on your website ahead of time. I think chapter 120 needs to be a little revised or maybe to include school boards or not, because if anybody has sat through and read chapter 120, it's a little confusing. But I think you all do a great job of posting everything on the website in plenty of time, 7 days in advance. I think that's reasonable. Let the public know what's going to be on your agenda and what they could come speak to.
Okay, thank you so much for that. All right, the next page, letter C. So I'm actually going to go up a little bit more. Just the paragraph above requirements when providing public input. Requirements when providing public input is bold, has a bold font. Right above that, it reads, during regular business meetings of the board offers the following 2 opportunities for the public to provide input. 1, on an agenda item, consent agenda, and/or action agenda, prior to the board taking official action on a proposition, and during citizen input section for items that are not on the agenda. I'm just going to pinpoint that for a second because I'm going to refer back to it, and I just didn't want us to get lost. So if we go to C, letter C, and as I'm looking at it now, I think it's there. Each individual speaker shall be allotted up to 3 minutes during citizen input as indicated on the order of business, and up to 3 minutes on an item on the consent agenda. And, let's imagine the or wasn't there because somebody wants and at an action item, action agenda as indicated on the order of business. The time period may be adjusted by the presiding officer. So right now, we only have essentially 2 opportunities for someone to speak. Right now, it's only once during citizen input, at which time they can speak about anything or an item on consent, and during action item. This actually gives someone an opportunity to speak 3 times, which I'm totally okay with, but I just wanted board members to see that and recognize the way that it's written now, we're giving people 3 opportunities to speak. If that is the case and we continue on that route, which again, I'm totally okay with it, that's going to change the way the way our board meeting runs, because, and I'm going to give it to Dr. Moore, because then the question is, we shouldn't adopt our agenda until we hear those citizens speak first, in case, for example, a citizen comes up and says, I want to speak to consent item A. They have a serious concern, board member wants to pull consent item A to action. We have to hear them first and then adopt, where I think now what we're doing is we're adopting first and then.
You should adopt first.
So that process there has me a little bit, like, I think we need to talk about that a little more. And Dr. Moore had a really great suggestion of what he did, what they did in Miami. So I don't know if, whomever wants to. Dr. Moore, can you share
I don't know
how
what
it
you did in
worked in Miami?
The conversation we were having through the chair was regarding consent items, and if there was individuals who signed up to speak to an item. The big difference in my previous district is everything was placed on consent. Everything was placed on consent, and the only items that were pulled from consent were items board members, all 9 of them, that's why we were there till midnight, wanted to speak to. So an individual from the community did not know what was going to be on action when they showed up, so they just signed up for those items. So prior to approving the consent item, so it was motion for approval, individuals who signed up to speak to B4, that was on consent because no board member signed up to speak to it, had the opportunity to share with the board their concern regarding B4 before they actually took a vote. So that was the process in Miami.
Go ahead.
Because I wrote the same thing. A lot of times, either a board member will remove something from consent to action, or they'll add an action item every once in a while. Discussion items, that's another story. But anything we're going to vote on is something that I know we need to hear from the public ahead of time, and we
Right.
want to hear from the public ahead of time. It's whether or not that public person wants to speak at the beginning of the meeting about the topic, or as we're about to vote on that topic. But when it gets moved from consent to action, maybe there could be something where I could say, this item got moved from consent to action. Would you like to speak about that item now, or would you like to speak about it in action? Is that
That would
could
work.
happen? We could
We would
add
just have
that
to work on your script to make sure that we have
Right.
it captured that way.
very concisely.
Yes. You're
So
asking the
it's-
attorney to be concise.
Sorry, it's either or, it's not both and?
No.
I think they're two different things. I think if you are going to offer them the ability to speak during citizen input, which is on anything that's not on the agenda, they can speak then, and then they can also speak to any proposition before the board, anything you're going to take action on. So that could be a consent agenda item, it could be an action item, it could be a public hearing item. So yes, they would have the ability to speak on.
One time about that item, though.
About each item, if
Yeah,
that
they
kinda
can't
makes
speak
sense.
about it at citizen input and then again at action. They can only speak about, that's why I write down what they're speaking about.
Right.
Because they can't, because I've even stopped people when
okay.
they go to speak again
Yes.
about it. Yeah, and that's what gets really interesting, is to try to figure out everything. People are throwing in 19 things and writing down everything that they're talking about. And then when they come up to speak again, making sure that they already didn't talk about that. So I'm fair to everybody, because it is hard when that happens and somebody speaks about something twice. So,
And your other opportunity, Madam Chair, is you could bifurcate the two opportunities to speak and have citizen input separate from agenda. I mean, it doesn't really make a difference, but there are some districts that have citizen input at a separate time on their agenda
Yes.
than they do on the other thing. I mean, from what I've seen, it works well for you all.
Orange County does that, correct?
Yes, Orange County does a separate, before the meeting starts, they have their, a separate time where the public can come talk to them for, I think it's up to 45 minutes before the meeting starts. And that's, the reason behind having it a separate time is because a lot of times it was parents that were bringing up concerns about students, and we didn't want that student information made public or.
On camera.
Right, so that was the reason for that. It was more of an intimate setting for the parent to come talk to the board about an issue or whatever. But it really depends on how you all want to do it. I mean, I've seen it work pretty well for you, and I mean, there's other districts that put their citizen input at the very beginning or at the end or in the middle, and it kind of depends on what, if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Right.
So if it's working well for you, but we can tweak some of that language if we need to.
The only one I think we need really cleaned up is when something gets added to the action or it gets moved from consent to action. That's when it gets a little gray and people don't understand, can I speak now, can I speak later, can I speak both times? Yes, they can speak both times, they just can't speak about the same item
Right.
both times. And I think that we need to word that carefully.
Madam
Yes.
Chair. Dr. Moore, so on the Miami thing, everything's consent, and so a board member would, when would they move it to action?
Not suggesting we do this, because
Yeah, I
this
don't
would
like it.
change practice. This would be moving a lot of cheese. That was the first item on the agenda, was to pull items from consent to action.
So board members knew which ones they want. I mean, when we have action items, we get that agenda out to our public, they know we're going to vote on that. So how did?
Once again, they're all being voted on, whether it's voted on in consent or within an action
Okay,
item.
Okay,
Everything's voted on.
okay. And one other thing that our Madam Chair said, as far as sometimes action items are added. And to me, I just think, you know, unless it's an emergency, we're not giving our community time to respond. In fact, in the Sunshine Manual, it talks about if you know it's going to be a little bit
Controversial
Oh,
or-
that's exactly what
right.
it was said.
Yeah.
And so we could talk about that when we meet with you as
Mm-hmm.
far as ethics too, because if our community doesn't know we're going to vote on it and it just pulls it, it's not a good look.
It's not something I typically recommend
No.
that you add an action item without advertising to the public. And even if you think it's something small, I mean, there are provisions in the statute where you can add emergency items for like an emergency
Sure.
procurement if you had a hurricane or whatever, and that totally makes sense. But as a general practice, I don't typically recommend you add action items without sufficient public notice.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
No, I just wanted to, yes, there's more, but I just wanted to mention to you all that the definition of proposition is on the first page. It's the second paragraph on the first page. Just wondering, Ms. Enville, if we can boldface that first, the 4 letters, action, agenda, or proposition. So we see exactly what that is there for. Okay, so then at this point, it looks like we are going to have 3 opportunities for citizens to speak, once during consent, once during, once during citizen input, once during consent, and/or once during action agenda. Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Actually, they can speak more than that. They can speak to
Any
each
item.
action item.
Any item.
Yeah.
Yes, and each, also maybe we should,
Public hearing.
and/or
And a public
each
hearing.
action, should we add the word each? Oh, well, then it could be each consent agenda too.
No, that.
Yes,
may-
it could.
So I do think there's something, hang on a second. Individuals may speak only once about a given item. Now, I do know there's some school boards that have provision that individuals can only speak once, and you have to talk about everything in your 3 minutes. I think you would have a challenge with that. I don't know if those other districts have gotten challenged with that. But,
Well, everything that's on our agenda is different. So
is.
item A is different from B, is different from C, is different from E, and so on and so forth. So technically, they could speak to any of the items, and we're in our right to be able to give them that opportunity.
through the chair,
I'm totally
on
okay
your
with that.
citizen input item, you have them speak, you have them fill out a speaker form for every item that they want to speak about. So you could, I don't know if you've had that happen here, but you could have someone sign up to speak about every single item
Oh,
on
yes,
the
we have.
agenda.
Then, if that's the case, I also think you need to really look carefully at, and I know we talked about that, and I see it here, is that citizen input form that they fill out. We've had some really interesting wording on that form before. The and/or kind of confuses people. What do you mean and/or? What, can I speak to all of these items and/or I can speak to one? So I think we need to really be careful with that, because Yes, we have had people that want to speak to every single thing. It happened last meeting.
Okay. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, I'm gonna go to letter I, same page, letter I. Individuals must register their intent to speak in the public portion of the meeting by completing and submitting a speaker's form. Speakers' forms may be found on the board webpage and at the entry of the meeting hall. Speakers' forms may be submitted electronically no later than 4 p.m. the business day prior to the board meeting, or in person no later than 5:45. Okay, so my question is the fairness of the day prior to the board meeting. What I don't like about that is that our board meetings are always, it says business day, our board meetings are always on a Monday. So their business day would mean that we're limiting, to Friday. And I think that's unfair, because if we had our board meetings on Wednesday, then citizens, all they need is to submit their forms Tuesday, which is 24 hours. So I just think that's pretty unfair that in this particular case, we're saying the next business, the business day before. I would just recommend, if we can change that, and I don't know if legally we can, but if we can change that to 24 hours before the board meeting. Can we do that? Can I make that recommendation?
I think you all need to discuss what that might look like. I think it says business day because 24 hours before the board meeting might be a holiday, or it might be well, if in your case it is a Sunday because you have your
Sunday,
meetings
it's
on
always Sunday.
Mondays. Do you always have your meetings on Mondays?
Yes.
So you always have your meetings on Mondays. I think the purpose of giving them a timeline is because you want to make sure that staff has the ability to compile the responses received. I don't know how many you receive in advance. So staff has time to compile them and give them to you. And I don't know how, if they scan them and send them in, you take a picture, I'm not sure. But if you all want to, I don't believe we've advertised these policies yet.
No, they,
So, okay, so if you wanted to make a change and not keep it as a business day beforehand,
Madam Chair.
A couple of times, sorry, a couple of times a year, now that I think about it, we do have business meetings. It's not regular. We do have business meetings on maybe a Tuesday, for example, if it's election day. Then, we might have to switch something, or there's another Tuesday that we have to.
Finance.
Oh, yeah, our business finance meeting. So, I think in those particular cases, if we said 24 hours, it just makes sense. And if we changed our meeting to, again, if it was a Wednesday meeting, it would always be 24 hours, because it would always be the business day before.
I'd like
So
to-
we're suggesting we change I'm sorry, Terry.
That's okay. I think Doc Jones was next.
Well, I was just saying, having that the business day before, when we used to have Tuesday meetings, obviously, but I'm okay with how it is, because I think people who really want to speak will do that on that Friday or be here by 5:45. I think the majority know the
how it works.
rules as far as, and again, this will all have to go through,
Rulemaking.
review and then public comment and so forth. So I'm okay with how it is.
Mr. Dyer?
I was trying to understand if we're suggesting we move the business day, the days of the meeting from Monday to Tuesday or Wednesday? Is that what the suggestion is, or is it?
No, just for citizens to submit their electronic speaker form
Okay.
24 hours ahead of the meeting instead of Friday.
Like they'd have to
To
do
me,
it
it seems the business day is appropriate. You can, because if you don't want to do it the business day, you can be there by 5:45 on the day of. So it's, you can do it 15 minutes before the meeting, I guess. Or you can do it the business day before. It gives the staff, it's probably easier on the staff if they know first thing coming in on Monday, knowing there's a business day, that that they can prepare where it's necessary, but if in the instance that they can't meet that date, then they have another out 15 minutes before the meeting. So it seems kind of that it works the way it is, to me. I don't know.
I always feel bad when somebody comes that doesn't know the policy and really wants to speak to us about something of concern. And then they come, like that happened, I think, last meeting or the meeting before, where somebody comes after the meeting started and wants to speak, and I have to say no. And it's to be fair to everybody. It's not because I don't want to hear them, I don't want the board to hear them. It's because we have to be fair. Otherwise, we're opening up Pandora's box. So whatever we all agree to, we need to be firm on it, and I'll follow through with it, because I want to be fair to everybody. But I also think we want to hear from the public. You know, we want to hear what they have to say. If somebody comes and they have an urgent concern and they're upset that they didn't get to speak, I don't know who that person was in that meeting, but I said to Ms. Morey, hey, can you find out who that is and what their concern is so that Dr. Moore can know? Because I don't want somebody to run away thinking, well, I didn't get to have my chance as a citizen to speak. You know, so that does concern me a little bit.
And they can always send you an email.
Yes, but when we're in the middle of the meeting and
Right.
they
don't
I can't
understand.
tell them that.
Right, right,
You know, can't stop the meeting and
Right.
say, I'm sorry, but this is what you have to do.
right.
Because of the decorum of the meeting.
Do we know how many we get on an average? I mean, when I was chair, it was not many electronically. Do we know how many we get by Friday, 4 PM? I might, very few.
A 0 to 1.
I
Once
should
in a
say
while,
2.
we get 1.
Okay.
Now, there was an exception during COVID.
COVID, that's when they could email it all.
We had hundreds one time.
Kristen read them.
Anybody else? We're good? Okay.
So did we have consensus or no? We didn't have consent. Dr. Posca, we need your input, what your preference is.
It sounds like if we're not getting a lot of electronic speaker form submissions, I don't know how big of an issue this is. And it may even be something you could do the morning of the board meeting. It doesn't sound like it's a heavy lift, but I don't feel strongly one way or the other about this.
I just want an ironclad policy and an
Yeah.
ironclad script that's short and kind.
Ditto.
You know, sometimes I read that and I think, this sounds so harsh. It sounds awful sometimes. And I don't want to say some of it. But I know, you know, standards are standards and statutes are statutes, so.
So if you want to, look, I just, like I said, I don't have any pride of ownership of drafting. I just took a stab at it and gave it to you. If you want to soften it up, you're not going to hurt my feelings at all. What I tried to do is just make sure that the three were consistent. The policy matched the citizen input guidelines, matched your script. And yes, I tried
That's
to
why
make
you
it
hear
shorter.
me intercept the word please and thank you.
I can certainly do that.
No,
in your
I
script.
do
Oh,
put
yeah,
that in
you do,
there.
yeah.
You know, please be kind, please
Right.
give us the same opportunity that we give you as far as speaking.
I think-
Because I want people to have respect for each other.
Yes.
And when we take out that vulgar words and stuff, that concerns me a little bit as to what could happen with our meetings. So I will need the attorney to please interject. Don't feel like you can't say something as the parliamentarian to make sure that we're following exactly what we need to do, because I don't want to cut somebody off now that I can't. If it's vulgar or obscene, I need you to say, hey, that's drawing the line, because until that line's drawn, I don't know exactly what line we're looking
Right,
at.
right.
It's going to get, you know, I knew now, but now it's kind of opening up a whole can of worms.
It has, and I can always, too, in your script, we can always have like alternative language. Like if it's getting a little out of control, you can say, you know, there's that provision in 1001.372 that allows you to remove someone from a meeting, but you have to give them a warning first.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the way your script was now, you know, you said this is your first warning. I really think if
You
someone's
can't really
getting.
do that. You have to warn them
Yes,
individually.
yes.
I know that.
So that's why I've changed that a little
Thank you.
bit.
I don't like, that was put in after.
Yeah.
You know, the first time I was chair, that wasn't in there, and then it was in there, and it was like, that really isn't following statute.
And you
because
don't really need to, I mean,
No.
you might need that, like, as the chair, you might need that when things are getting out of control.
Right.
Read this box
That's when I
things are
say,
getting
we'll
out of
take a
control.
recess. And then I talk to you and say, what can we do, what can't we do? Because I don't want it to get out of control. We don't want our meetings to be out of control. But we also want the citizens that are upset to be able to speak,
Right.
but speak kindly and respectfully, please. And I know we can't insist that they do it now. So that's
Sometimes
going to
it's
be
hard to get
entertaining
through that
at
3
times.
minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next item is the third page. Top of the page, letter B. This has strikeout through them, just a little bit of some background on this item. And I think we should keep this, maybe you want to tweak it or something, because we do have people who are this is the section, board members, that we recently put in, we added, that allowed a representative to speak on behalf of a large number of individuals, organizations, groups, and we allotted them up to 5 minutes to speak on behalf of the entire group. So if, there were, and this is only in the case of a large number of people. So if we had the room full of people, standing room, and a particular person didn't want to wait until the end, they could give their whatever to a representative of their organization, and the organization could speak on their behalf. That was recently adopted by us. I just think we should keep that in there in the event. Now, we haven't had anybody use it, but it is supported by the statute. It is supported by, so I just think that we would be smart to keep it in there in case we ever do need it, just to ensure that we know how to handle that situation moving forward.
Can I ask a question about that? I'm fine with that if somebody walks out and says, hey, I need you to speak on my behalf, and it's an organization. The question I have is, how do we know that person has authorization to speak for other people? Because that could also get very sticky. Anybody could come up and say, I have the ability to speak on behalf of XYZ group, and we don't know that for a fact.
Okay, thank you.
I don't disagree with you on that. I just think that by law, we have the right to,
If you look, actually, it's under.
she's so awesome.
I know, she is.
Keep up the
I'm having
good
a hard
work.
time reading. It's still there under F, under requirements when providing public input.
Oh,
Rather than all members of groups or factions desiring to speak on a particular matter at meetings in which a large number of individuals wish to be heard. And it does
it
give
was
them.
moved.
Yep, 5 minutes, yep. There you go, good job, thank you.
It's under F.
Yes,
On the other page, they moved it. They didn't.
Second page.
They didn't delete it, they just moved it.
yep.
Yay, all right. Disregard.
I'm looking at the wrong F.
Second page, about halfway down.
Okay, I see it rather. Again, how do I know if they're supposed to be speaking on behalf of a group?
You don't.
They
And-
just
and-
state it and then they
And large is
they can
not
deal with the group
adopted.
later? Okay,
Well, because that person still then would also have the ability to sign up individually if they wanted to.
right. Okay,
And I think also sometimes you might have people that, I can't stay, and so,
That's awesome. That was quick.
that was quick, that was
That
good. I'm
was
glad she
good.
saw that again.
I missed
So-
that.
so let me ask you this, though. How does that avoid somebody just coming up and saying, every time, I represent this group, so I get 5 minutes, instead of I get 3 minutes like everybody else?
It doesn't.
Somebody else speaking from the group.
Okay. I think that's opening up another can of worms. It is, because you're going to have 5 minutes for everybody then. They're going to all argue that I'm speaking on behalf of a group.
And the word large is not described or defined, so
No, it's not.
large to some people might be different than large to others.
What's your definition as an attorney, what large is?
I would say it depends. That's my favorite answer, don't you know?
I'm personally a little concerned about being fair to this.
So how about I look at it, if I could be so, suggest that I look at it and see if I can tweak the language a little bit to see, and maybe look to see what other districts have done, and perhaps reach out to Neola to see what the basis for this language is in there. I understand, it's probably designed so you don't have to listen to 600 people speak, right?
Right.
But it didn't help much during a recent pandemic that we had, so they all
No.
spoke. So, and like, sometimes I can think of it maybe perhaps like in a zoning issue, and you have like an HOA representative that wants to come speak on behalf of 225 homeowners that they don't want this zoned. I see that as being a good use of this provision.
I just thought of something. I have seen in the past where somebody does that and they bring up a petition with signed names. I'm speaking on behalf of this group, and here's the petition with the signed names to prove that they're part of that group.
So
I
they could
have
do that.
seen that in some public meetings. As a matter of fact, I think I saw it in Tallahassee. So I'm not sure if that's done somewhere else, but that might be some way to say, okay, this person is speaking on behalf of a group. Because I can see where somebody does that and somebody else complains about it. You know, I want to be fair to everybody and want to make sure that we're being very cautious about this.
Could I add?
Yeah.
One thing that you could potentially do is come up with a minimum number to define that group, and then request that they list the name and maybe email address of the people they're representing. And then at least there's something on paper you can go back to.
And that
So
way
it's
the
not-
people
yeah.
that they're representing know that they've been represented,
We can even contact and be like, hey, was this something you agreed to?
right?
And then if
I like that.
somebody's consistently violating this, you know,
I like it, because then they have to prove that they were really speaking on their behalf, because anybody could do that, and then, hey, you spoke on my behalf and I didn't give you that permission. So
Yeah, but I think
agree with you.
you're also
something
gotta be
like 10
careful.
people or something. Maybe something like 10 people or 7 people, some sort of threshold,
Whatever,
and
yeah.
list it.
I just think that, you know, to be specific about who's representing who, because I don't have the right to go to a public meeting and speak on behalf of my neighbors without my neighbors agreeing to that.
Yeah.
And yet I go and do that, and who's going to get in trouble? Well, the group that allowed me to speak, and that's us. So we would be just as much trouble as that person would be. So I don't want to get in the stickiness of all that. And I think that's a great idea.
I don't think we would. get in
Mr. Dyer?
Yeah, I'd say that just, you know, we want to let the public speak, let all the individuals speak. I mean, we've been here till 1 o'clock in the morning before. I mean, if that's what it takes, you know, why have that in there? Because then everybody's going to be a member of some organization.
Yeah,
Let's do
I
3
agree.
minutes and let everybody speak that wants to speak.
I just
Until they're
think it's
finished.
opening up a huge can
Yeah, I
of
do
worms.
too. I think it opens up a can of worms. I think it's just, let's just let people speak.
I agree.
Well, it's
Mr.
already
Zario?
it's already in our current policy, and it is the law. The law says that we have to allow them to have that opportunity. The
Does the law
other,
say
if
that?
they want it. If I want to speak, for example, if I'm in an organization and I don't want to go up to the podium, but I want my organization representative to speak on my behalf, I have the right by law to say, please speak on my behalf. So,
Is that, may I ask the question to the
That's in
attorney?
the
Is that
sunshine.
true? You have the right by an organization to speak more than an individual citizen?
Not more, I think I think the statute, I have to read it exactly, and I can get back to you on that, but I think it allows boards, agencies under Chapter 120 to establish parameters by which a representative of an organization can speak on behalf of other representatives.
So we can recognize an organization, but we don't have to give them more than 3 minutes.
no.
I don't think
Yeah,
it speaks
the
to
statute
increased
doesn't say how
time. It's
much
something you
time.
could.
Right.
So if we
So,
give them the
okay.
same amount of time, then we're being fair.
Right.
And I do think if you were talking about, you know, requiring proof of emails for 10, I think you would have some suppression concerns that somebody would bring up, because you're not going to verify those 10 emails before you
Yeah,
give them.
I mean, that-
You
it
can't
just-
even
it
verify
just-
that a
it
person
just
lives where they
doesn't work.
live, so.
You're true.
Okay.
I mean, we couldn't do it ahead of the meeting.
No.
You're right.
But remember,
Zario?
let's go back to that big meeting that we had in August of 20,
Yes, the one where we
Whatever
had
it
the
was.
pastor come?
so listen, let's think about that one, right?
Yeah.
Let's say, because this wasn't in our policy back then. If this were in our policy, we wouldn't have been here for 6 hours listening to citizen comment. We would have been able to allow citizens to say, I want my representative to speak on my behalf, so we're giving the organization 5 minutes. We're not giving 10 people 3 minutes each.
Yeah.
It still, it lessens the amount of time, number one. Number two, I want to point to, the language in this really isn't that, it's not that much for us to like go crazy over right now. It actually says, a representative speaking on behalf of a large number of individuals associated with a group or faction may have their time to address the board extended up to 5 minutes.
At
So it
the
doesn't
discretion of the board.
Out of discretion of the board, so we still have discretion.
Comment, Ms.
So
Weaver?
this isn't, like,
Yes.
we haven't had this issue, nobody's said, I want my organization to speak. But
Right,
for us to be in compliance and make sure that we include it in there, I think it's smart.
Dr. Jones?
It's not in the law that it has to be 5 minutes. It's up to the board. So I think I'm to the point where every individual has a right for 3 minutes. And yeah, there can be some long nights, but I think that way our community understands that we're listening.
So this item's going to be voted on, correct?
It is, and
So
you'll have
board-
public input.
Okay, so public input, we listen to everybody, and then the board members can say yay or nay to whatever issue that we all have been discussing right now. I know we're in workshop, so we're discussing it here
We
in the
are.
public. But then when it gets tweaked or whatever, modified, and then we go to vote on it, we can all say, I really thought about this, and I've listened to a lot of people tell me their input on it. You know, here's why I don't think I should vote for this part of it, or whatever. And we can all have that on the dais. Okay.
Okay, so then, the next item is letter C. I'm still on that same page, letter C. Staff members shall not be expected to answer questions from the audience unless called upon by the board chairman, presiding officer, or the superintendent. Previously, this was, and it's still in here somewhere where it says that board members may or may not respond to citizens who
Yeah, it still says
speak.
that.
This one, though, says staff members shall not be expected. I just want to clarify, though, staff members meaning, for example, cabinet. This one particular letter doesn't refer to board members, correct? Just cabinet or other employees.
Madam Chair.
We're not staff, correct?
No, you're not staff.
Okay.
But I think this was designed for, you can't, it's designed because you don't want a member of the public. Their opportunity to speak to you during public input is to talk to you all. It's not to grill a particular staff member or the superintendent about particular policies. And so it's making sure that their comments are directed to you all, and then you all, with the superintendent, can make the determination as to whether or not, oh, I understand you have this, please go talk to Mr. Green in the back, or whatever, you know, you have a student services issue or whatever, that kind of thing. I think that's why that's in the policy, so the public doesn't expect to be able to address staff members individually and get an answer directly there on the dais.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And then the next item, my last item on this is on the last page, and it is number 5. Okay, the way it's written now, it says, call for a recess or an adjournment to another time when the lack of public decorum so interferes with the orderly conduct of the meeting as to warrant such action. So that's the presiding officer may. So I get all of this. My concern is that according to Robert's rules, no motion to recess or motion to adjourn shall be made by only the presiding officer. Even in the event that there is a lack of decorum, there has to be a motion, and the board members have to vote for a recess, and the board members have to vote to, just like we vote to adjourn. So that is, according to Robert's rules, it's a motion to recess is a privileged motion that allows a group to take a temporary break during the meeting and can be called by any member without interrupting a speaker, while a motion to adjourn is used to formally end the meeting entirely, requiring a second and a majority vote to pass and is not debatable. A motion to adjourn, end a meeting, immediately ends the meeting, it's not debatable. Similar to a recess, a motion to adjourn is not, requires a second and a majority vote. A motion to recess is not debatable, meaning there is no discussion allowed before that vote. It can be amended, Although not debatable, a motion to recess can be amended to specify the length of the break. It requires a majority vote to initiate a recess. A majority vote is needed.
So I attended a Robert's
smiling.
Rules. I attended a Robert's Rules session at FSBA,
Uh-huh.
and this specifically came up. And the comment, and I wrote it down, and I recently saw it this week, so it's really fresh in my mind. Policy supersedes Robert's Rules. Is that correct? Yes. So if it's on our policy, then the board chair can stop something that's out of control quickly. Correct?
Well, that's the intent, is the
Yes.
board chair controls the meeting. And
Right.
so sometimes there's a motion to adjourn in a second by the things, but, by the other membership, if somebody else wants to make a motion to adjourn and it's seconded. But there's other situations where it's acceptable for a board meeting to adjourn without a motion and a second. And so it's kind of like at the end of a meeting, most of the
don't do that.
time, most of the boards that I sit on, seeing no further business, we've come to the end of our agenda, seeing no further business, we're adjourned. And so there's not a motion and a second. And I don't know if this is your question or if I'm not interpreting correctly. And then the other time would be like, let's say you have a motion to end at a certain time. Let's say you have a hot topic rezoning and you have where this meeting is from 5 to 10, at 10 o'clock, it's been advertised to stop at 10, we're done till the next day or whatever, so that would be another time. And then the third time, you don't really need a motion, and a second would be in an emergency situation, of course, because that could be any emergency. So does that answer? I don't know if you specifically are you asking for it specifically to be put in policy that there's a motion to adjourn in a second?
Yes. Well, I'm okay when there is a lack of decorum, like if, there's a ruckus going on and, there needs to be an immediate action to that. I'm okay with that. But I think if we're going to, and our policy does say that the meetings are run by Robert's Rules, we shouldn't cherry pick. If it's not in Robert's Rules, then we can talk about how we want it to look, in terms of procedure. But if we're going to follow it, then we're going to follow it. So I'm okay with saying when there's an issue, someone's throwing something in the room, yelling and screaming,
An inappropriate
certainly,
T-shirt.
certainly, yeah, no, I agree. Certainly in that particular situation, I think that it should be, the chair's right to adjourn to take care of that, because that to me is an immediate concern. But I just think that general recess and general adjournments, if we're going to follow Robert's Rules, then we should follow it.
So I have one concern about that, and this is this. This is all changed because of recent law, right, or legal
Case law,
action.
right.
Right. And so there's going to be some times recently when something comes up or somebody says something, and I'm going to need to recess to talk to the attorney. And I see that as handcuffing the meeting, because if I can't recess and have a short conversation with you about, hey, am I allowed to stop this person? They're saying F-bombs and everything. Am I allowed to do that? Am I allowed to turn off the camera or not? I need to know, especially in the next couple of months, when people test this, because it's going to get tested. And so, I don't want to be handcuffed by, hey, can I get a motion of a second and everything else just to do that? Because I think that that's getting kind of a little bit ridiculous and handcuffing the chair, whoever the chair is.
Right.
They need to be able to run the meeting so that it stays on topic of the board's agenda. And when you get people that are saying things, vulgar or whatever, obscene, and so I'm trying to get you as the attorney, or, you can say, hey, you can interject and say, no, they're out of line or whatever, and I'm fine with that. I'd love that, actually. So, because it will make it a little bit clearer as to what people can say and what they can't say.
Madam Chair? And as a former chair, I agree with Ms. Berenborg on that. You get the feel when things aren't going well. But just a question, and I looked at this carefully. If a statement is obscene, vulgar, offensive, pornographic, so they'll say it and we'll say, no, you can't say it, and then we go on. So they can be obscene, vulgar, and we say, no, that's obscene, you can't continue with that, but they get to say it.
So
Am I
it's-
reading that correctly.
Well, you're not going to know if it's obscene or vulgar until
Till you
after
hear
they've
it.
said it.
Well, I know that, but most people in
Can't read their minds.
have in common.
If you can, I need to.
I think we could all agree on what's obscene or vulgar
Yes,
or
absolutely.
threatening.
Absolutely. And so to me then, in that particular instance, the chair would warn, no, this is obscene, vulgar, whatever you want to pick your adjective in there. I'm asking you to refrain. If that person does not, then I think you recess the meeting and you ask the individual
Okay.
to leave. I've already warned you once, right? I don't know if that answers your question, but I think going back to this whole policy is your public participation at board meetings.
Right.
And the section that this is under specifically is titled Additional Rules of Decorum and Conduct. So I think this makes sense because you're setting forth the expectations of the public as they provide input to you all. And if there is something going wrong, this gives the chair the opportunity to recess, stop the meeting, adjourn the meeting,
Let
whatever.
people take a breather.
Right, take a breather, it can be whatever. And then to Ms. Rosario's point, I think if you want to specifically address how you're going to run your meetings other than this policy that allows you to adjourn or recess for decorum purposes, that would be better addressed in your policy 0165 that governs your board meetings.
Okay. And I'm fine with that, like, recessing a meeting for another reason, that's fine. It's during citizen input when you don't know what somebody's going to say.
Right,
Right.
and how to handle it at the
Yeah, and
at the
and
minute.
at times, it's really tricky.
And just in general, and we all know this as board members, but, we need to model what we expect, and hopefully our community will too, because you can be upset or angry about something, but you don't have to be threatening. You don't have to be abusive.
And actually, your policy says don't have to be repetitive.
Mr. Dyer?
I make a motion for me to adjourn. I've got to go.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. Anything else on this?
Second.
Not on this one, no. The other one is on the citizen input guide.
He'll learn. He'll learn.
I've done that before, my first game.
Let me just double check.
Which document, Ms. Zari, I'm sorry.
I'm just
Is it
double
April
checking
1st?
now because we just talked about something, so I don't want to be redundant.
Okay.
I think. So that's the same one, there were duplicates. The speaker's form, I think we should just go to the speaker's form. Now that because I have circled the and, or, and the and, so I just wanted to make sure that we agreed with this, because if we didn't, then I would say let's go ahead and change that here as well, but I think that looks fine. The group speakers thing is not on here, the speaker's form. It doesn't say if you are a member of a group or an organization, you may have your organization's representative speak for you on your behalf. That's not on the speaker form.
Can we also ask that they name their organization?
Sure. You can
Okay.
ask.
Yeah.
They may not fill it out, but.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
And also, hold on one second. Also, when I guess in the last one, I didn't catch it, a speaker came and they spoke and didn't say their name. But by law, they have to do that?
No.
Okay, that's what I'm saying, because somebody said, well, they didn't say their name, and I knew who it was, so I told them.
Yeah,
But
sometimes you forget because especially when it's the same person that you're very familiar with the people that come speak to you all the time. I also don't think I wouldn't recommend that you legally ask them that before they speak to you, they have to give their address,
yeah,
right?
that
So-
used to be the case, I remember. They used to say their name and their address.
Right. The point of
We
collecting
can
their name
ask
and
if they'll
or
give us their name, correct?
Right.
Okay.
It's so that if you needed some sort of follow-up with them, some sort of email after the fact, they ask for specific information, you'll say, hey, I'll have Mr. So-and-so get with you or Ms. So-and-so. It's the way to contact them again. And sometimes board members want to reach out and talk to them again, but you can't patrol what email address they put down. Sometimes they don't even write legibly, so you can't even really reach out to them because you can't read what they wrote. So, no, I don't think you can require them to, you like them to talk to their name. You're going to call them up by name, right? Because they wrote their name down, but they could write their name down as Betty Boop, and
No,
you
this
would call
was-
Miss Boop.
It
right?
wasn't during citizen input, it
No.
was during a public hearing.
Okay.
And so during a public hearing, it doesn't say they have to state their name. And I have had people come and speak and say, how come you didn't follow up with me? Well, I didn't have any way to follow up with them.
Right.
There's no phone number or email, so.
Right. Well, and I think it's a decorum thing and it's a respect thing, just have all been talking about. I mean, you want to talk to Ms. Smith, thank you for bringing your concerns to our attention, just like they would talk to Dr. Jones, something. It's just a back and forth respect thing. It's not a requirement.
Okay.
And then I just, on the very bottom where the check boxes are, I'm wondering if it would be easier, because each person would need one of these forms anyway, if maybe on the form we just say choose one.
Yeah, you could do that.
I mean, I know you have or, but we still have listed up on top, a new form needs to be completed for each item that you want to speak
Right,
to.
so have them choose one.
So on this one, it would just be choose one of these as an option.
That would help Michelle,
Yes.
and that would help me.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, that
Or they-
does
Because
make
if they have to
sense.
fill out one for every single thing they want to do, which is helpful
It's hard,
to us, because you got 15 minutes to compile that information.
Right.
Timestamp it,
Get them
hand
in
it to
all
me in an order,
And
and
then
then make
produce
sure
them
that I
pursuant to-
remember to say it in action and consent and all that. Yeah.
And then compile them all and produce them pursuant to a request for public records if somebody asks for them. So, no, that's fine. I was trying to play with the
I know.
spacing and the formatting with that. It was kind of hard to fix it all on one page, but I think it works. But no, I can add those things you just talked about.
Because at the top, does it say, yeah, for each item you wish to address? Okay. And you might want to bold each item,
Yep.
because a lot of times people will write on there, several of them. I've seen that too. Although I think you're pretty good, Michelle, at telling them they can't do that now. It used to be, when I was first doing this, it was all over the place, trying to follow them.
And just so that I understand, like, your formatting and all of this, so typically what I'm used to seeing is green font just means we're adding it, and red is we're taking it away. So in moving forward, anything that's not redlined, we're keeping.
Yes.
Okay.
So I didn't have the Word version of your speaker's form or your citizen input guidelines, so I took them off the website and copied
Yeah.
them into Word doc. So that was my rudimentary way of showing
Yeah.
you what the changes were. And so
Yeah.
it'll look pretty, and I think once you decide on your final versions, we'll translate them into the languages they need to be and make them look all pretty. We'll put your little logo at the top, and I was just trying to make sure you saw the substance and that you saw the proposed changes the best I could show them to you.
By the way, there is PDF version you can convert back into Word, you know that, right?
I tried that, it didn't go so
It
well.
didn't
so
work?
I figured-
Okay.
So the last thing on the guidelines, just also the 5-minute thing where the group or represent on the guidelines. If, you want to put that in there, it's not in there. Lastly, is there a way to keep, because there are 3 documents here that seem to get lost in the shuffle, that really need to stay together. Is there a way to combine them all together?
I'm sure somebody is more technologically advanced than I that can do that, so, yes. Because it's the whole reason why I wanted to make sure, that's why I sent you all that email.
Yeah.
Your policy requires that they all travel together anyway, so
Correct.
that's why I wanted you to see them all together. So yes, I will work with somebody who has more technological skills than I to put them all together, and they can be all in one document.
Perfect.
See Bruce Green.
Thank you.
All right, with that, any other for the good of the group?
Yes.
Yes.
Just tomorrow night at Vero Beach High School, and thank you to Ms. Maddox for getting this information out to us. The gospel singing at 7 p.m. at Vero Beach High School, and thank you for getting that information out for our public. I think it'll be great. I went to their program last year and it was exemplary.
All right, thank you. And with that, we are adjourned at 3:33.